Francisco González. Welcome to Tech Talk with Daniel.
Thank you for having me, Daniel. And I have to say that it's an honor to be here because you have talked to many industry legends, which I am hesitant to call myself, but you seem to think I am for having me here.
I'm not hesitant to call you an industry legend.
Thank you very much. Yes. So I'm honored to be rubbing shoulders with industry legends and being here to talk about stuff. So yes, thank you for having me.
Well, the honor is all mine. You know, I usually interview people who worked on games from my childhood, but given that we're the same age, it'll be a fascinating change of pace to interview a game developer who most likely played the same games as I have as a kid.
Yes. Would you like to see my collection, Daniel?
Sure.
My extensive basement collection of all my big box games. So these are my Sierra games. I have them alphabetized by company. So I have my Sierra games here, including the Sierra Educational Series, because I used to have them separate.
What's wrong with you?
Well, no. I organized them by company, but within, so like the left, since there are so many Sierra ones, the left shelf is all Sierra and the right shelf, other way. The right shelf is LucasArts and miscellaneous, but within the Sierra bit, they're alphabetized, and within the LucasArts bit, they're also alphabetized, but there are a lot fewer LucasArts. So you can see LucasArts starts over there with Day of the Classic Adventures, and then Day of the Tentacle, and then ends with Rebel Assault. And then we start with Blade Runner, Broken Sword, etc., with all the other ones.
The fact that you said that you have less LucasArts titles means that we started off on the wrong foot.
Well, I only have fewer LucasArts titles because there are fewer adventure games by LucasArts than Sierra, but I own every single, with the exception of the Classic Adventures, which includes the early Zack McCracken Maniac Mansion and Indiana Jones and the Last Crusade. I own every single LucasArts adventure game that was ever made, including, I want to point out, the jewel of my collection, which is Loom. And I will...
Loom is always the jewel of any collection.
Yes, but I will show you why it's the jewel of my collection if you'll indulge me for one moment. So I never had Loom in the big box growing up. The first version of Loom I ever played was the CD-ROM version, which came with my single speed external CD-ROM drive that I got when I was a kid. And
the crappy version of Loom, yeah.
Yeah. So I never played the real version of Loom until many years later when I got that Classic Adventures pack. So in 2015, I released my first game, A Golden Wake. And in 2015, I went to GDC, and I was there for Brian Moriarty's postmortem of Loom. And I was sitting next to Emily Morganti, who is the PR person for many indie adventure companies or developers, including Wadjet, whom I was employed by at the time. And at the end of the talk, Brian Moriarty said that he would only trust 3 studios with a sequel to Loom: Telltale, Double Fine, and Wadjet. And then he said, "Talk to me, I'm on the make." And Emily and I looked at each other and said, "Let's go talk to him." So we went up and talked to him, and he was super nice. He shook my hand. I told him that I had played Loom, that I had loved it as a child, that the usual stuff that you never want to say to a developer because it makes them feel old. And he told me that he had played A Golden Wake and that he had enjoyed it. And I was like, "Oh, wow, that's great." And it was one of those things where it was like, in the moment, I was very excited. And then afterwards, when I left, it hit me. And I was like, Brian Moriarty played A Golden Wake and he liked it. And I had to call my mom and be like, "Mom, you don't know who this is, but this guy who made this game that I played as a kid told me that he played my game." And I started crying on the phone because I was just so emotional that this hero of game design of mine had played my game and had said that he liked it. So that was very nice of him. And then I saw him again at a thing at NYU, the conference that NYU used to have called Practice. And he gave a talk there, too, that was really good about a thing called Kino Automat that was like this choice-based movie from the 60s. Anyway, he was active on Twitter back in the day at the time. And one day someone tweeted, I think it was Anatoly Shashkin, aka DOS Nostalgic. He tweeted about a big box copy of Loom, and he followed both of us. Brian Moriarty followed both of us. And I said, "Oh, I've never had a big box copy of Loom. Like, that's so cool. I've never been able to find one." And he messaged me and was like, "Hey, what's your address?" And I was like, "This is my address. If this is what I think it's for, I can't believe it." And lo and behold, a few days later in the mail, I received this box copy of Loom, which I have since opened, but I haven't opened the cassette. But the reason that it is so you can see it still has this and all that, and it's on the discs, and it still has the cassette, the audio drama in the cassette in the shrink wrap, which I will never open because, one, I don't have a cassette player, and two, I'm not going to open it. But this alone should be the reason it's the jewel of my collection. But the reason it is, in fact, the jewel of my collection is because included on Lucasfilm stationery, personalized Lucasfilm stationery, he sent me a note. March 27th, 2015. Nice meeting you at GDC. Something for your collection. Enjoy, Brian Moriarty. And that was like the sweetest thing. He's such a nice guy. So that's why Loom is the jewel of my collection.
First of all, Loom is the jewel of anyone's collection.
Yes.
Because it's Loom. But
yes.
Yeah.
It was, in fact, the first LucasArts adventure game I ever played.
Wow.
So,
really?
Yeah.
That's interesting. We'll talk about that soon. But first, you have to know that I know that GDC talk very well. And I've listened to it
It was a great talk.
Times.
Yeah.
It was an amazing talk. And I've listened to it numerous times. And this Sunday, there is the premiere of my conversation with Ken Macklin. And in my conversation with him, I show him a part from that GDC talk in which Brian talks about Ken's special effect at the end of the game when the swans hold the fabric of reality in their beaks. So he's talking about Ken Macklin's work. And so I played for Ken. So I know that GDC talk very well. And in addition to showing it to Ken, ever since Brian gave that GDC talk, I've been bugging Dave Gilbert about creating Loom. I mean, I tweeted him in 2016, and then in 2017, and then in 2018. And he kept on saying that the problem with creating a sequel for Loom is the rights. Getting the rights to create the game. And he doesn't want to handle any of the legal issues. And so I contacted someone I know at Disney who handles the IPs and the rights and who's in charge of the recent resurrection of Monkey Island. And I asked him, would it be a problem for Wedge-Die to get the rights for Loom? And he told me, let's talk. And so I told Dave. But I don't know. Dave seems reluctant to work on the sequel.
I mean, if it were me, I would also be very reluctant to do that because one time someone posed a question on Twitter, which was, if you could work on the sequel to any classic franchise, which would it be? And I said, I wouldn't want to work on any for two reasons. One, because the burden of expectations is so high for such a beloved game like Loom that no matter what you do, you're not going to please everybody, especially if you're not the original creator. Even if the original creator is involved somehow, it's never going to meet everybody's expectations. And two, because as a fan, I want to play the game. I don't want to be involved in its creation. And if I'm involved in the creation, it won't be a surprise. So I want to play the game on my own as a fan. So I understand why one would be reluctant to take on a project like that.
Yeah, but if you get Brian Moriarty involved, and according to his GDC talk, it's not like he's handing out the rights and allowing you to write your own story. He wants to be involved and present his story just through a different company other than LucasArts, which no longer exists.
Of course, but
So
look at what happened with Return to Monkey Island.
You'll just read it before you create it.
Yeah,
So
I guess
it will be an original story. You won't have to invent anything, or you'll just experience the game differently.
True.
Before creating it. And now that I know that you've played Loom, I'm going to give you a trick question.
Okay.
Reflecting on your earliest gaming memories, can you share a specific moment when a game truly transported you to another world, leaving a lasting impression on your imagination? And the answer should be Loom. Go ahead.
Yes, the answer is Loom, but I also want to be a jerk and say that it was, in fact, Another World, which transported me to Another World, or Out of This World, as it's called in the US, which I played on Sega Genesis way before or about the same time I played Loom. But yeah, no, Loom was very much, it definitely, I mean, I mentioned it was the first LucasArts game I played, so it was the first real, like, proper PC VGA. Although I did play the VGA version, but it definitely did transport me to another world, especially with that booming "Please choose your skill level" voice that starts up when you load it up with the CD version. But yeah.
And as a gamer growing up in the late 80s and early 90s, were there any hidden gems or underrated titles that you discovered? And what made them stand out in your gaming repertoire?
That's a good question. Hidden gems, I don't know, because I mean, I wasn't really, as far as I knew, I was the only person I knew who was playing like adventure games. It wasn't until many years later when I started developing adventure games that I actually met and spoke with other people who had played, let alone heard of these adventure games. So to me, I was just like discovering everything myself for the first time. But among the games that I played early on, I mean, I guess the obvious answers would be, I loved Loom, don't get me wrong, but I guess to re-answer your previous question, the one that really transported me and made me feel like I was in the world was The Secret of Monkey Island, because I mentioned I got external single speed CD-ROM, and it came with Loom. But I remember going to a store. It was called Tiger Direct, which I think then rebranded as like an online thing. But they used to have a warehouse, and you could go, and the version of The Secret of Monkey Island that I have is the CD version with the Red Book audio that was published by the software Toolworks. And I remember putting it in and hearing the music and that big crescendo that starts, and then it's like and then it starts and I was like, wow. And I remember just hearing that noise, that cymbal crash that leads into the main theme. It was just like super evocative, and I was like, wow, this game is great. And just walking around Melee Island at night. And I remember I must have played that I was in 6th grade or so it would have been 1992, 1993 maybe. And I remember that summer I went to go visit my cousins who lived in Puerto Rico, and going to a Caribbean island after having played The Secret of Monkey Island, I was like, oh my God, it's just like The Secret of Monkey Island. And yeah, so that was a really special time. And I think that was a very special game at that point.
I also had the first version of The Secret of Monkey Island I played was the CD-ROM version. And then at the time, I didn't have a sound card. And so I played it on my computer. And then I noticed that in certain sections of the game, the CD-ROM drive keeps on reading without stopping, when in other sections, it just reads and stops, reads and stops. And so for some reason, I plugged in my headphones and then I heard the music. And that's how I experienced The Secret of Monkey Island with Sound Blaster quality sound without actually owning a sound card.
Yeah.
But I presume that you had a sound card at the time.
Yeah, I believe so. But I also remember plugging in headphones directly into the CD-ROM drive to hear the music. I don't know why I did that, but whether it was because it was a choice or necessity, I'm not sure. But yeah.
And one of the great things about PC gaming in the 90s was the technological advancements. It seemed like every year there was something new, and you had to upgrade your computer every year just to keep up with all of the recent requirements for the newer games. Now, in the evolving landscape of gaming technology during your childhood and my childhood, can you pinpoint a particular advancement or innovation that significantly altered your perception of what's possible in the gaming realm?
Yes. I have one specific instance, which is the first PC I had was actually a hand-me-down PC that I got from a cousin who was into computers. And it was a 286. It was an IBM 286 something. And so I had, this was before the CD-ROM drive, because the CD-ROM drive was part of this upgrade. So I remember her husband came and we went to a local computer fair with the intent of upgrading the computer. So we ended up upgrading to a 486 with the external CD-ROM drive and a sound card, because I had a PC speaker before that. So I had played stuff like Hugo's House of Horrors and some of the early Sierra games and stuff like that. But I'm pretty sure that I hadn't played any. No, wait, I'm wrong. I had that the Christmas before that, I had gotten the Castle of Dr. Brain, which was VGA, and I had gotten King's Quest IV. And obviously I had played these with the PC speaker, especially King's Quest IV. So I remember the moment that the sound card that I loaded up King's Quest IV and I heard the music for the first time on an actual like ad lib or whatever it was, because it wasn't a Sound Blaster, it was like an ad lib or some knockoff or something. But hearing the music for the first time when I had heard it only on PC speaker, it was like, it blew my little mind. And I was like, oh my God, this sounds amazing. And yeah, that was a very significant revelation, which included what I just mentioned about with the CD-ROM. But the first thing I remember hearing was the upgrade of the sound from PC speaker to sound card, which is funny because later on learning that like King's Quest IV was one of the games that Sierra used to sell sound cards, because it was like, wow, it's got a full score and all that. So
now, when I got my first computer, I stopped going out to play and I just stayed home and played with my computer.
I faked being sick. I faked being sick from school the day after I had to go to school when we got our new computer, because I wanted to go home and play with it. So I hear you.
so I have another trick question.
Okay.
Beyond the screen, as if there is something beyond the screen, how did your passion for gaming intersect with your broader interests as a kid? Were there any instances where gaming served as a catalyst for exploring other creative outlets or hobbies?
It definitely got me more interested in art. I mean, I was already interested in like drawing and cartooning and stuff when I was a kid. In fact, I wanted to be a cartoonist. But when I actually started playing these games, I started finding myself doing more like drawings based on the characters in the games and stuff like that. And I remember like designing puzzles on paper. And of course, I didn't have anybody who understood what these things were, so I couldn't be like, here, play test my little puzzle. But I just was enamored by the mechanics of adventure games and the idea of the puzzles that you had to solve and collecting items and figuring things out. So I had a very, very early passion for the design of adventure games. And pretty early on, I remember thinking like, oh, I would love to make one of these. But it wasn't until many years later that I actually got the opportunity to do so, because I didn't have any programming experience aside from, using BASIC and following a guide in the back of a magazine, which wasn't much. But
and at the time, did you play any of the Phantasmagoria games?
I didn't play them when they came out. Actually, you might cancel the interview. I've only ever played Phantasmagoria, the first one. And I didn't play it until early 2000s.
Yesterday.
I want to say. No. I've
In
definitely
preparation for this interview.
If I would have played Phantasmagoria 2 if that was the case. Sorry, Phantasmagoria: A Puzzle of Flesh. I did play. I played the first Phantasmagoria. I remember I would already come home from college, so it would have been like 2005. Actually, I shouldn't say this, but well, you can strike this out if you want. But I played a pirated copy of the first Phantasmagoria. I've since purchased it, but yeah, that was my first experience. I burned all 7 CDs from an ISO.
Jeez.
Yeah.
It was probably more expensive to burn 7 CDs in 2005 than to actually buy it in 2005.
Probably. I got my copy on eBay for 99 cents. So my box copy of Phantasmagoria, which I have right there. See? Between Pepper's Adventures in Time and Police Quest Collection, there's my box copy of Phantasmagoria.
Yeah.
Yeah. I scored that for 99 cents on eBay. One of my best
99
eBay
cents
deals.
back in 2005, because nowadays it costs like, I don't know, $500.
99 cents in 2015 or 16.
What?
Yeah. Yeah, no, I went on an eBay
box with everything in it?
and the guide.
Jeez.
It was one of those rare eBay deals where you get lucky because the person selling it doesn't know what they're selling. I also got Conquest of Camelot for $1
Seriously?
in the box. Yep.
Are you using a hacked version of eBay in which you get better deals than the rest of us?
No, this was, of course, before everything went to hell, and now it's impossible to find anything on eBay. No, I had a pretty significant big box collection when I was a kid, but then at some point my mom was like, "You have too many boxes, you have to get rid of them." So I had to get rid of a whole bunch of them.
We all had that experience.
Yeah, which I later came to regret. And so after I moved to New York in 2013, I decided to go on a spree on eBay to recover as many of the big boxes that I had gotten rid of as possible, which meant that in a lot of cases, I ended up with 2 copies of the same game, which I would then turn around and sell just the new copy I had gotten without the box to kind of try and get some money back. But I will admit that I paid, in some cases, I paid a ridiculous amount of money for an empty cardboard box. I did that with Day of the Tentacle and Indiana Jones and the Fate of Atlantis. I paid like $20 or more for just an empty cardboard box, but it was worth it in the end. So, because I have my big box collection again. There's a couple of games that I have
a copy of Phantasmagoria that I have yet to open. I purchased it a year ago.
Nice.
And I plan to do an unboxing video, maybe once it turns 30 next year.
Oh.
So,
wow. Oh, wow. Jeez.
We'll have that nice 9095 Air inside of it.
I just opened my sealed copy of Broken Sword 2 the other day because I tried to put in the CD and it doesn't read my first CD anymore. So I opened up my sealed copy to put in the CD, and it definitely had that 90s air.
Wait, there was a sale back in late December and early January and it cost like 80 cents.
Funny story about that, because my partner wanted to play through the Broken Sword series, and we had played Broken Sword a while ago, and she was like, "Oh, I don't have any of the other ones." And I'm like, "Are you sure? Because they usually sell those." So I got my my USB thing here, and I copied over the CD after opening the sealed copy and took it upstairs, and then I couldn't get it to run in ScumVM because for some reason ScumVM thinks it's the demo and not the full game, even though it's all the right files, at least with this copy that I had. So then I said, why don't we look on GOG? And lo and behold, she has all of them. So I'm like, so I just opened up my sealed copy for nothing. But it's fine because I don't really care about sealed copies and devaluation or anything because I'm never going to sell these. So it doesn't matter.
Yeah, you keep telling yourself that. Okay.
I'm never going to sell them. They'll sell them at my estate sale when I'm dead.
It's just like my Hebrew version of Loom that I'm never going to sell.
Which was a point in the Brian Moriarty talk.
Exactly. I know.
Yeah, I remember that.
And there was someone in the crowd who translated something that a screenshot from the Hebrew version.
I know exactly who that was too.
Really? Who was it?
It was Oded Sharon.
Really?
And
wow.
Yeah.
Awesome. Now I know that. So.
Oh well, there you go. I mean, you can verify. I assume it was him because he was there, and it sounded like him. So you can ask him if it was him, if you know him, and then he can verify if that was him or not.
Okay, will do. Now, how did a decline in popularity of the adventure game genre in the late 90s affect you personally?
Well, it affected me personally in that I had fewer games to play. But at the same time, it also drove my passion for wanting to make them because I thought, well, if the big companies aren't making them anymore, maybe I've got a chance at it. Which led to me then, when I was in college in the early 2000s, Googling Adventure Game Maker and finding Adventure Game Studio. And I downloaded it and I started using it, and the rest is history. So I guess in a way, it kickstarted my, no pun intended, because I've never actually used Kickstarter, but it kickstarted my development career because there was a void. And so I thought, well, I'll just take a crack at it myself.
But before that, you also used another game creation application called Click and Play.
I sure did.
Which I also used at a time to create my own Phantasmagoria fan sequel.
Oh, did you ever upload it anywhere?
No, I didn't, because in the back of the manual of Click and Play, it tells you that in order to distribute your games, you have to purchase a commercial license. And I don't know, it costs like $4,000 or $1,000. I'm not sure. So I didn't distribute anything.
To distribute your game at all?
No, it was
or
to
for
distribute
commercial purposes.
It was commercially, but as a kid, I didn't understand if distributing my game would be considered as commercial distribution.
Right. Because I was going to say, if it was just for distribution, period, there were a lot of people on America Online who were violating that rule, because there was a lot of Click and Play games on there.
So back then, I used to take screenshots. Cool. How did you take screenshots from games? I remember I took screenshots from Space Quest 6 and from Police Quest 4 and from Phantasmagoria 2 and from Duke Nukem 3D. And I had to cut the characters pixel by pixel because there was no Photoshop. You'd use the internal editor for Click and Play, and it was easier with screenshots from Space Quest 6 because the characters had a black outline, so it was easier to cut them out. With Police Quest 4, it was more problematic because it was, it was similar to FMV games. But, as a kid, I didn't have anything better to do, so I cut those characters out as well. So I had a game that had Duke Nukem 3D backgrounds, as well as the lead character from Police Quest 4, and Roger Wilco, and Adrian from Phantasmagoria 1, all in one game called Phantasmagoria 3.
You essentially made your own version of Limbo of the Lost.
Yeah, kind of. So how did you use Click and Play?
I used Click and Play. At first, I used it to make fun of my teachers, specifically one of my Spanish teachers, and I made a game where he would like jump around and throw. We used to have to do these little like index cards of like conjugating verbs, and he would throw them as the weapon. And then I found a game online that someone had uploaded called The Secret of Brother Island, which was a Monkey Island parody, obviously, of their little brother. And I was like, oh, let me try making an adventure game in this. So I did, and I made Monkey Island 2.5, in which I took the screenshot of the very end of the Big Whoop amusement park, and that was my
Mhm.
background. And then I put a bunch of like little texture blocks as the platform because it was a platformer. And I did the same thing where I got the sprite of Guybrush and I cut it pixel by pixel for his walk cycle, so he could walk left and right, keyboard controlled, of course, because you couldn't really do point and
Of
click
course.
and click and play. Yeah. So the game was literally just he walks into a room in Big Whoop, and then off screen he's like, "Ouch! Someone pierced my ear. Oh, my legs are stretched. Hey, what's this bumper car?" And then he comes out, Guybrush from Curse of Monkey Island, on the other side. So it was no gameplay. It was literally just that, and I was like, "Oh, okay, I did it." So then I tried making other games, and I did. And that was what I used Click and Play for.
Did you also create the game that everyone who owned Click and Play at the time had to create as their first game, which was the kid on the skateboard
Yes.
with the ball, creating
Yes.
a breakout-like game in which you need to hit the toys with the ball while moving the
Yeah.
kid on the skateboard.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep. I still have Click and Play. It's in there. It's there in the box on my shelf.
You're currently using it to create Rosewater.
No, you joke, but I've been tempted to load it up and make an actual game in it and see if I remember how to use it. Except
Good luck with all that.
Yeah, I need a Windows 3.1 virtual machine for one thing, which I don't know how to do. So
before we go over your list of games, I have to ask you one question, given that you were a gamer in the 90s. What's your favorite Commander Keen game?
Oh, Commander Keen 4, for sure. The first
almost. The correct answer is Commander Keen 5.
You know, that was the first game that I actually sent in or bought and got actually did the shareware thing and bought. And I remember it took a really long time to install. Couldn't get it running. But I don't know. I liked the map of 4 better than 5 being on the spaceship the whole time. Just my personal preference.
And one other thing I realized is that you played The Secret of Monkey Island probably around 94, 95 when you got your CD-ROM drive, right?
Earlier. I want to say 93 probably.
Okay.
But
and
around
so
then, yeah.
That means that the first Monkey Island game you played was the first one?
Yes.
And yet you consider Curse as your favorite?
Yes, that's right.
Okay, then that breaks my theory, because my theory says that everyone's favorite Monkey Island game is the first one they played, because the first one I played was Monkey Island 2, and that's my favorite. And a lot of our viewers consider Curse as their favorite because Curse was the first one they played.
Right.
So there goes my theory.
Sorry.
Years of research down the drain.
Sorry. No, I'll tell you I played the Monkey Island games in order, because I played Secret first, and then I ordered Monkey Island 2 directly from LucasArts from their catalog in 94. And then Curse obviously came out in 97, and I was really excited for it. And I remember I regret that I threw away the copy of PC Gamer that I had that was like the whole sneak preview of The Curse of Monkey Island. That's the one where the demo CD had the demo on it, and I played that demo so much. I think that demo and the demo for Sam and Max Hit the Road are the 2 LucasArts demos I played the most. Maybe the Dig too, because the Dig's demo was interesting. But yeah, so I played all the Monkey Island games as they came out, but Curse is my favorite one, and I feel like I've settled on that opinion within the past 10 years or so. Because I never really had a favorite, but when I thought about it, I was like, yeah, no, Curse overall, I think Curse for me is like the perfectly designed Monkey Island game. I'm not going to say adventure game, but Monkey Island game, I think Curse is my S tier. So.
Okay. In 2001, you released The Lost Treasure of Ron.
Yes.
What can you tell me about that masterpiece?
Well, I'll give a brief explanation of what RON is in case no one is familiar with it, which I don't assume many people will be. But RON stands for Reality on the Norm, and Reality on the Norm was a community-based, crowd-funded series of games that was started by Ben Yahtzee Croshaw, who was one of the earliest developers to finish a game in the adventure game studio community. And Reality on the Norm itself was this like weird British town. It kind of is similar in concept to that old show, The League of Gentlemen, in that it's this kind of quirky town in the middle of rural England where all the inhabitants are just strange. And the idea was that it was community based. So everyone was free to make their own entry in the series. And if you drew like the initial set of backgrounds, Yahtzee had drawn them and he did the same with the characters, and they were a very simplistic style. So the idea was that you didn't have to be good at drawing. You could just, imitate the style, and it was fairly easy to do that. And so if you drew a new background for your game or you created a new character, you were encouraged to make it freely accessible and upload it somewhere so that it was, resources that anyone could come and use to make their own game. So I found those games around the time I found Adventure Game Studio in 2001, and I decided to take a stab at it. And so I made The Lost Treasure of Reality on the Norm, which stars a pirate called Hooky McPegleg, who comes to Reality on the Norm looking for treasure. And I don't remember much about it, except that at the end, when he digs for the treasure, he ends up appearing on the platform where the mayor of the town, who happens to be a zombie, because that's the kind of quirky sense of humor this series had. The mayor is giving a speech, and he says, we have an opening for a postman, because our postman's dead. Because actually the game that had come out before that was called The Postman Only Dies Once, which was actually made by Dave Gilbert, in which the whole thing is that the postman has been murdered, and the main character of that one is a private detective. So that was another fun thing. Like, different developers, there was overlap in the stories, and some of the games took place at the same time as other games and things like that. So anyway, he gets at the end of the game, he becomes the new town postman, which led me to then make a sequel called Hooky McPegleg Pirate Postman, in which Hooky is now the postman, but because he's a pirate, he's illiterate. So the main thing is that he has to learn how to read in order to properly deliver the mail. So yeah, I had a lot of fun with those games, and I made 3 of them before I decided, and I was working on a 4th one, but that never came to be. And then I sort of branched off and made other games. But I don't want to get ahead of my questions.
Yeah. The interesting thing about Hooky McPegleg is the fact that it was released, if my sources are correct, 3 weeks after The Lost Treasure of Ron.
That wouldn't surprise me, because they weren't long games, and I made the first Ben Jordan game in about 2 weeks. So yeah, that sounds about right.
In 2002, you released the game Chef.
Ah, yes, the Chef. That's probably my favorite Reality on the Norm game I made, just because of how ridiculous it was. So somebody had drawn an Italian restaurant in the main town square background. And so I decided to explore who the Italian chef was. So I created the character of Chef Luca, and then I decided to give him a brother named Guido, who happens to be a nudist, because I could just draw him like sitting on the couch with like his legs folded so you couldn't see anything. And the whole thing is that he's like, "Oh, Guido, why do you..." He's embarrassed by the fact that his brother's a nudist, and he's like constantly trying to get him to renounce his lifestyle. But then his brother gets kidnapped, and he has to go save him. And the main things about that game was there was 2 jokes that I wanted to do. One was Guido gets tied up, and you find him, and he's all tied up with rope. And the solution to free him is you have to use a fork, and he twirls the rope like spaghetti, And like, that's how he unravels the rope. And that was a fun animation to do. And then the other one is that at the very end, he's like, oh, you know what, Guido, you getting kidnapped has made me realize that I shouldn't impose my opinions and let you and, let you live your life. So in fact, I'm going to embrace your lifestyle, and I'm going to be known as the Naked Chef, which, if you recall, was the name of a reality show at the time. So it was like a stupid pun. And then there was another animation where he just like takes off his clothes and he has a black bar, covering him, because I'll tell you a little story about that later. And then, everyone's like, oh my God. And that's how it ends. So yeah, the chef was a lot of fun. I really enjoyed that one. And that one was fun because I actually started experimenting with digital audio, because up until that time I had used MIDI music for the backgrounds for the music. And at that time, I think, I don't know if they had just upgraded AGS to be able to use digital audio or if it had always been able to do that. But I got actual digital MP3s or OGs or whatever we were using back then. And the soundtrack was all digital. So of course the file size was huge, but it was worth it. And then I even like figured out how to do the thing where you can like have a file with an intro that then goes to a loop, and figure out how to like get them to loop, which I still use to this day. So that was a learning experience as well.
So you recreated your own iMuse system.
A very, very simple version of it. Yes. At that point, nowhere near as complex. I just watched your Michael Land interview. Nowhere near as complex as actual iMuse.
Now, the problem with this game is that you didn't future-proof it for live streaming because it has licensed music, which I'm sure you pay for.
No, it was a freeware game. I didn't make any money off of it. I wasn't concerned. I know, you know. But yeah, it's all music from like Fellini movies, and the intro is like some organ playing Mambo Italiano. And then, of course, it's got the Rosemary Clooney version of it at the end over the end credits. But yeah, I didn't know.
It also has the Super Mario Brothers theme.
It does. Yes, that's right. Yeah, I forgot about that. What a dumb game.
Well, I'm sure the Mambo Italiano guys won't sue you, but Nintendo just might.
Oh, yeah, they definitely will. Oh, well.
Moving on to 2003, you were a beta tester on The Phantom Inheritance.
Was that I guess that was a Reality on the Norm game? I don't remember that game. Oh, wait. Yes, I do. Yeah, it was a bunch of ghosts. And
yeah, exactly.
Yeah. I don't remember much about that.
It is linked to the Reality on the Norm because you're walking around in the Reality on the Norm town.
Yeah, unfortunately, I don't remember much about that game. Back in those days, beta tester just meant, you would send somebody a game and they would play it and maybe give one or two notes or something, but it wasn't quite as involved as it might be today. So I'm sure I have a lot of beta testing credits that I probably don't remember.
It was the same for AAA companies back then, because I'm certain that Sierra didn't do any beta testing at the time, according to the releases they had around the same time.
Yeah, maybe.
On Robert Redford Saves the Day, episode 3, you're credited as voice talent.
I don't remember. I remember. I mean, I did some voices for early AGS games. The one I remember the most was, I think, my first voice acting credit that I remember for someone else's game, because actually Hooky McPegleg, Pirate Postman, I did a voice pack for, and I want to say, I'm fairly confident that it was one of the first, if not the first, fully voiced AGS games ever made. I played Hooky McPegleg, and I did a terrible Scottish accent for him. But I remember being excited because I got Yahtzee himself to play the character of the Grim Reaper. And I got a few other people to in the community to voice the characters, and it was really fun. But I don't remember doing a voice for Robert Redford. I remember the first voice I did was for The Adventures of Fat Man, which I think was in 2003. And that was the first. That was the first commercial AGS game. And I think I still have the CD, the little mini CD around here somewhere. But I played the villain, Toxic Man, in that one. But yeah, I didn't remember Robert Redford Saves the Day having a voice. So I don't know.
So your credit on Robert Redford Saves the Day, episode 3, Who Framed Roger Redford?
Right. Those were games. Yeah, those were games made by what was his name? His real name was, I believe, it was Kyriakos Hassapis. He was part of the Greek AGS community, and those games were ridiculous because it was Robert Redford Saves the Day, but it was like the character's body was a cartoon, but his head was a photo. But it was Harrison Ford, not Robert Redford. So the joke was that everybody thought he was Robert Redford, but it was actually Harrison Ford. So, yeah.
Wasn't it by Antonis Vavayanas?
Okay, then maybe it was. I don't remember. I know it was a Greek
Antonis
person.
Vavayanis.
I don't remember what his AGS forum name was. But
Butcher.
Yes, of course. I thought, okay. Then I'm confusing it because I thought Butcher was Kyriakos, but maybe not. I'm probably not even saying that right. Apologies.
Anyway, you're credited for voice talent,
right?
In order of who can boil more eggs in 2 minutes. So you're the second one in the list of credits. So that means it's better or worse.
I guess I must boil eggs fast. I don't know. I 2003 was a weird time, man.
What's your egg boiling technique? Share it with us.
My egg boiling technique is I haven't boiled an egg in a while. Actually, it's been a while since I've made deviled eggs. But usually, I get the pot and I fill it with water and I put the eggs in and then I boil it. And then after a while, I remove them. And if I'm making deviled eggs, I put them in ice water so that they'll firm up. And yeah, that's about it, really.
Riveting.
I really do appreciate the fact that you do ask questions no one else does. This is a very refreshing interview, and I'm 100% sincere when I say this.
Well, I'm glad you enjoyed the questions themselves. Like I said before our conversation last week, I interviewed the composer of the Outlaws soundtrack, and we talked for 5 hours, and we only talked about the soundtrack for 10 minutes. So. Right. You can assume that there will be 0 Rosewater questions in this interview.
Okay, that's fine by me. I've talked about it a lot.
In The Adventures of Fat Man, you're credited as Toxic Man. Do you have, you mentioned it before, do you have any anecdotes to share about your voice acting in this game?
I don't remember how I got it. I don't know if I auditioned or if I just volunteered. It was very, very different. It was very Wild West back then, no pun intended. And I just remember that I was sent the lines and I recorded them. And I remember that there was one bit where like I improvised and I went on this whole tirade about like, you know, how he didn't like being a supervillain. And it's like, oh, the Joker, like I never really wanted this and blah, 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 blah. And then I improvised another thing about like how upset he was with his crappy powers. And he's like, oh, the Joker falls in a vat of acid and he becomes the Joker and someone else and whatever. And what do I get? This crap. And I remember that the game developer, Mike Doak, I think that's how you say it. Ionas was his forum name. I remember he was like, oh, I really like the improv that you did for him lamenting his superpowers, so I'm going to write that into the script. But I'm not such a big fan of him, the other thing, so we're not going to use that. And I was like, okay, that's fine. That's cool. But yeah, I remember I recorded it on a really crappy microphone, but somehow it sounded okay. And that's about it, really. I remember when the game came out, he sent me a free copy of of the game on CD, which, as I mentioned, I still have on a little mini CD. So that was cool.
And that was your payment for the game?
Yes. I'm trying to think of the various voice acting roles that I've done in games. I think I've been paid for 2. But I won't say which ones because I don't want to shame anyone who hasn't paid me for voice acting.
We'll get to that.
Okay.
In Dead Man's Political Party, you're thanked for your enormous artistic contributions.
Okay.
What
I have
were
no idea.
Your enormous artistic contributions to this Reality on the Norm game?
I have no idea. I don't remember if I did any art specifically for that game or if they're just thanking me because I had done some backgrounds for one of my own games or something that they used. But I don't believe I did anything specific for. If I did, I honestly don't remember.
You're the only one thanked in this credit, so
yeah. Who made that? Was that Barian? Was that Barian Williams that made that game? AGA, yep. Adventure Game Aficionado? Okay, yeah.
Indeed.
Then I don't remember what I did. Sorry, Barian.
And you used so many licensed songs that I guess this can't be live streamed either.
Oh, no. Yeah, Reality on the Norm.
Eric Clapton, U2, the Cranberries.
Oh, wow. Yeah, I remember doing the same thing. I remember using a lot of just like MIDIs of popular rock songs and stuff in my Reality on the Norm games. I think I used I remember in Hooky McPegleg there's this whole subplot where he like is haunted by Davy Jones, and every time he shows up, Dead Souls by 9 Inch Nails comes on. And I didn't even know the song. I was just like, oh, this sounds cool. So yeah. Anyway, go on.
Donnie Darko is one of my favorite movies. And so imagine my surprise when back in 2004, I found out that there is a free Donnie Darko point-and-click adventure game online.
Yeah.
All of this in a time in which LucasArts was still actively working on the abomination that is Full Throttle 2 Hell on Wheels.
Yes.
Now, what motivated you to create a point-and-click adventure game based on Donnie Darko?
So the Adventure Game Studio forums had, or still has, I believe, a monthly contest called MAGS, which I believe just stands for Monthly AGS. And it was a game jam before game jams were a thing. And the idea was that every month there would be a different theme, and you had 1 month to make a small Adventure Game Studio game based on that theme. And so there was 1 month, the theme was movies. So it was like make a movie, a point and click, make an adventure game, an AGS game adaptation of a movie you like. And at the time I had seen Donnie Darko recently and I really liked it. And so I decided to make a Donnie Darko adventure game. But rather than be a straight adaptation of events in the movie, I thought it would be clever to make the things that you do, since it's a story about like time travel and time manipulation and things like that. I decided it would be interesting to make the events and the things you have to do in the game be things that you don't actually see on screen in the movie, but be related to events in the movie. So it's like Donnie's going around. Frank is like the narrator, which I realized later I recycled the exact same concept for Lamplight City, having the narrator be like directly talking to you. But yeah, so Frank the bunny is the narrator when you look at things or when you do things. He says like, oh, don't do that, Donnie, or whatever. So you as Donnie Darko are like, I don't remember exactly what you have to do. I think there was one thing where you had to like get the movies reels that Kitty Farmer had banned so that Donnie could go to the movies. You had to like unlock the dress store so that his sister could get her costume for the Sparkle Motion routine. And I don't remember what
to place the letter in the mailbox.
Yes. Yes. So I was like, well, let's have it be just like stuff that if you've seen the movie, you'll be like, oh. So yeah, and then that one's also not friendly for streaming because I used tracks from the actual Donnie Darko soundtrack on there. So
Indeed you have.
yeah, but that was a lot of fun. I liked I mean, that's the theme here. I don't think that there's any game where I'm like, oh my god, that game was horrible. I've had fun making all of my games for the most part.
Moving on to 2004, you released 3 Ben Jordan games.
I did. I just realized that in a few months it's going to be the 20th anniversary of the first Ben Jordan game.
Indeed, so now it's time for a remaster. Stop working on Rosewater and remaster the first 3 cases of Ben Jordan.
I can't because I don't have the source code anymore. So I would have to do them from scratch.
Well, a remaster can be, you can start it from scratch. Boot up, click and play, and start working on Ben.
I will tell you this. I've had the temptation. I've gotten very close, but I've never pulled the trigger. Maybe I'll do it for the 20th anniversary. Maybe. But I want to do a Ben Jordan dating simulator called Ben Jordan Paranormal Invested Dater, where it's just a dating sim where he dates every character from the series.
But if I do it, I want to do it. You're truly invested in the wordplay you got in the title, but other than that, there's no actual substance.
No. But that's the thing. If I do it, I want to do it well. I don't want it to just be, oh, haha, that's whatever. No, I want it to be like an actual good game. So that's also what's prevented me from doing it because I haven't gotten the right. I'd probably get somebody else to do it, honestly, but because I have no experience doing dating sims. But I would want it. Excuse me. I would want it to be like a substantial game beyond just a novelty title and concept. So, yeah. I just imagine like Ben going on a romantic date with a skunk ape and like having to get him perfume or something for the date to go well.
Yeah, that'd be good. That seems like an adequate game for 2024.
Yeah.
So what can you tell me about the first trilogy of the Ben Jordan cases, and why is the third one your favorite?
So Ben Jordan came about because after I finished The Chef, as I mentioned, I started working on a 4th reality on the Norm game, which was called Kill Phil, which was a parody of Kill Bill, which had come out recently. And it was going to be like this ultra-violent. Yeah. I wanted to make movies before I made games. So I was very influenced by film in the early days. So I abandoned Kill Phil because it wasn't really going anywhere. And I thought, well, I want to make something else, but I want to make my own thing. So I had this idea to make a game about, it was very meta. It was about a guy who goes looking for the AGS source code because Chris Jones, the creator of AGS, had misplaced it. And so he goes on this globe-trotting journey to meet all of the active forum members and like search the world for the source code. And that I wrote up like a very rough design document, and I had some puzzles and stuff, and I drew like one screen and mocked it up, and it just didn't feel right. So I was like, But the idea of the whole like world travel thing stuck with me. So obviously one of the other games that has been majorly influential to me, one of the classic adventures that has been majorly influential, has been the first Gabriel Knight. So just the whole melding of fiction with historical stuff, and the idea of playing in a real world location just really appealed to me. That's what I love most about the first Gabriel Knight. So I was like, I want to make something like that, and then also mix that with like the globe-trotting thing. But then I thought, okay, well, I want to make a series about a paranormal investigator, but I can make it a series, so each entry is a separate case, so that way the games don't have to be super long. I can just make them short and then however many I end up making, there will be like a connecting story thread, and it'll feel like one big game at the end. So yeah, that's where Ben Jordan came from. And then also I wanted to focus on local legends and folklore rather than just generic vampires, werewolves, that sort of thing. So I made the first game in 2 weeks. It came out according to Wikipedia, it came out in May of 2004. It was In Search of the Skunk Ape, because I grew up in Florida and I was familiar with the legend of the skunk ape in the Everglades. So it was a very, very rough, easy to finish in 15 minutes game. But I finished it and I uploaded it and people seemed to like it. So I thought, okay, well, I'm onto something here. I'll make another one. So then with each Ben Jordan game that I made, it took longer because I upped the production values in small ways. And then by the time I made the third one, and as you mentioned, I made the first 3 in 1 year, which was crazy looking back on it. The second one, I think, took me about 2 months. I don't remember what month that came out in, but I know that I was working on the third one in the summer. I made the first one over spring break because I remember going home from school and drawing the sprites of Ben Jordan at home while I was on break from university. And then I came back and I finished it, and that's why it would have come out in May, because spring break was around April. And then I did the second one, I guess, over the summer. It probably took me about a month or 2 months. And then I did the third one in the fall. Or did I do it? When did the second one come out? You've got all the data and the dates. What month did
it's listed as 2004.
Okay, let me check the Wikipedia page, because Ben Jordan actually shockingly has a Wikipedia page that lists the actual release dates. Okay, so Case 2 came out. Oh, wow. Okay, so Case 1 came out May 27th, 2004. Case 2 came out June 26th, 2004. So it took me less than a month to get that one out. And then Case 3 came out in October of 2004. Okay, so that tracks. Because I remember working on Case 3 at university when I was there for summer school. So yeah. So when I started doing Case 3, that's when I actually sat down and wrote like a whole game Bible for what the rest of the series was going to be, and figuring out how many other cases I was going to do and what the overarching story was going to be and all that, which is why I went back and remade the first 2 later so that they would fit in more with the overarching story, because I was kind of just making it up as I went when I did those 2. Excuse me. And the reason that 3 is my favorite is it's got one of my favorite soundtracks. Because I was working with a guy named Andreas Slot, who went by Gormak on the AGS forums, who very graciously agreed to be my composer and did all the work for free. And I burned the poor guy out because I made all these games in such a short amount of time, and I was asking him for music constantly. But I think his masterpiece is Case 3. So I love the score for it. I love the theme of it. It was very Macbeth, like, little Scottish village thing, even though I'd never been to Scotland at the time. I have now since been to Scotland, and I realized how wrong I got a lot of things. And just the theme of it, the score, the fact that I was living on my own at school in the summer, it was great. It was a great time. And yeah, I just have really, really fond memories of working on Case 3. So yeah.
Now, in 2006, you mentioned that you worked on the deluxe edition of Case 1, which added improved graphics, extended storyline, and full voice acting.
Yes.
You were like the George Lucas of adventure games back then.
Perhaps.
And apart from that, you were also a pioneer when it comes to episodic gaming, because back in 2002, at LucasArts, they were testing out whether or not they can reduced the size of Full Throttle 1 to about 100 megabytes to see if downloadable content may work around that time. In the end, they didn't succeed with doing so, because it ended up being 150 megabytes, and in 2002 that was still considered huge. But the people who worked on 7 Max Freelance Police in 2003 and 2004 had the idea of having it as an episodic game. Now, that project was cancelled, and eventually Telltale Games released it in 2006, their own version of 7 Max in episodic format. But that means that your Ben Jordan series in 2004 is considered the first episodic adventure game, given that there were 3 cases released a couple of months apart.
Yeah, I guess so. I mean, I don't really know that. I guess it's kind of splitting hairs, but I don't really know if the Ben Jordan games. My intent wasn't to do. I mean, my intent was to do a series with different episodes. Yeah, I guess it is episodic, because my intent was to do a series with different episodes. But I definitely wasn't on any sort of plan of, oh yes, one of these will come out every 6 months or anything like that. I just. Yeah, and obviously they were freeware, so I wasn't even thinking commercially of, oh yeah, buy the whole series, and which is actually funny, because when I decided to go commercial, I was working on Ben Jordan 8, and one of my main things before I went commercial was, well, I have to finish this series. I can't just say, oh, well, sorry, everybody, I ended the 7th case on this major cliffhanger, and I'm not going to release the 8th game for free anymore. You're going to have to pay for it. That would be just like a huge jerk move. So yeah, I had to commit to finishing the Ben Jordan series before I was able to dive headfirst into my commercial adventure development career. But actually, as a side note, you were talking about file size, and it reminded me that I did another game for a MAGS competition, which was called Granny Zombie Killer in Mittens Murder Mystery, because actually one of my other projects, I forgot to mention this one, before Ben Jordan, was I was going to make a game called Granny Zombie Killer, which was going to be a Curse of Monkey Island inspired hand-drawn game about a granny who kills zombies. She was this nice, plump little British granny in a bright pink bathrobe, and she was going to go around her village and that had been overrun by zombies, and kill them. And it never got beyond demo stage, because I did release a demo, but then I also did the Mags game with her in it, where she goes to Mittens, which was the first AGS gathering in real life. And so someone murders the camp counselor or the camp janitor or something. And so you have to investigate and interview all of the Mittens attendees, and then at the end you get to pick who did it. And so I had everybody, as many people as I could, I had them voice themselves, and I did the voice of Granny and other incidental characters. This was another fully voiced game, and the voice pack was 15 megabytes, and people were like, "Oh my god, I can't download 15 megabytes." So that. I think that was 2002. Yes, 2002. So it's really funny to think about how that was a thing back then.
In 2006, you were credited on the Shiva as Detective Sam Darkin.
Yes, that was my first voice acting role for Wadjedi.
How did you get involved with Wadjedi to begin with?
So I met Dave through the Reality on the Norm. Well, I met, quote unquote, online. I met Dave through the Reality on the Norm forums, because, as I mentioned, he had done The Postman Always Dies Twice, and he did a few other Reality on the Norm games. So I knew him from there and from the IRC channel and stuff, and I met him in real life at the 2004 Mittens gathering. So yeah, I knew him from there. And yeah, when he said that he was going to do a voiced game, I said, "Oh, I would love to do it." And since I had done voiced games before, I guess that helped me get the role. So I played Sam Durkin in that game and many other games to follow.
So you auditioned for the role?
I don't remember if I auditioned or if I just said, "Hey, I'm interested," and he gave it to me, because it was a lot more lax back then. And I definitely didn't go in. Obviously, I was in Miami at the time, so I recorded it from my home on my crappy microphone. So I wasn't going in to like his apartment and recording. Actually, I think that was later that he started doing that. But yeah.
Well, you may have had a crappy microphone, but since it was Miami, I presume you didn't have a noisy heater.
I did not. No, I had an air conditioner, but I turned it off. Unfortunately, I don't have that control over my heater. If we had done this interview in like 3 months, it wouldn't be an issue, but
You know, we currently can't hear the heater. I know you feared that we might hear it, but we can't hear it because we have noise cancellation. Even now, before the post-production of the interview. So,
well, good. I'm glad. I'm glad. Because it's on right now.
Later on, you were credited on Warthogs as, again, voice acting.
Yes. That was a game by Crystal Shard. I believe that was also for a Mags. It was a Harry Potter parody. Warthogs, Hogwarts. And I played Professor Mumblemore. So it was Dumbledore, but it was just so there wasn't a whole lot to that role. But yeah, I remember that.
And still in 2006, in Blackwell Legacy, you played the unforgettable role of Hospital Guard.
Yes, who later got a name, Robbie Siegel, I believe. But yeah, I remember I was doing a Patrick Warburton impersonation there. So it was like, "Oh, hey, I can't let you in, ma'am. Sorry." That's probably not what it sounded like at all. I don't remember.
In 2007, you were credited again as Sam Darkin in Blackwell Unbound.
Yes.
And that same year, I presume that you had a thing for Dave Gilbert, so you decided to work on the Crackwell Legacy.
Well, that came about. Well, okay, two things. I also in Blackwell Unbound. I also played another character, which I am not proud of. Yeah, I'm not proud of Dwayne, because that was a big miscast. I should probably not have done that. I definitely should not have done that. But it was 2007. We didn't know any better. Hindsight's 2020. I often wish that Dave would do like a remaster of that game and recast the role and hire an actual Jamaican person, or at least an actual person of color, to voice that role, because it is me doing a really, really bad Jamaican accent. And I am not proud of that role. And I cringe every time I see somebody playing that game, because it's real bad.
No, I tried to skip over that credit, but you insisted.
No, I appreciate it, but I feel like it needs to be said. So yeah. Now the Crackwell Legacy came about because that came about as a conversation. There was so in addition to Mittens, for a while there was an offshoot called Britons, which was localized to the UK. And I went that year, and it was at actually Barry and Williams, who did Dead Man's Political Party. He hosted it at his house. So he had a bunch of nerds staying at his house. And Dave was also there, and there was a bunch of other people. And one day we were having a conversation around the table about parody games. I don't remember what spurred it, but there was apparently some game that had come out recently that was like a parody or something. And so we were talking about, like, where do you draw the line between, accepting it and being like, hey, now, like, respect my IP or whatever. So I, as an offhand comment, was like, how would you feel if somebody went and made like the Crackwell Legacy or something? And he was like, ah. And then, for whatever stupid reason, me and a few other people were like, you know what? Let's make the Crackwell Legacy. And I swear we made that game in 24 hours or less. Obviously, if you play it, you can see why. So it's a really, really tasteless, bad parody of the Blackwell Legacy, where Rosa Crackwell is a crack addict, and her hallucination is of the ghost of a pimp named Blowy. And the whole thing is that she has to get she has to put her neighbor's dog in the microwave to get crack or something. It's real bad. And the sequel's even worse. So let's not talk about that. It's got some humor that has very much not aged very well at all. And I'm not proud of those games. And I mean, they were funny at the time, I guess, but they're very immature and very silly. And yeah.
Seems that your earlier games are not future-proof either because of the licensed songs that you're using in the games, or because of the themes covered in the game itself.
Thankfully, there's only a handful of games that I look back on and think that they have not aged well. So
yeah, the main problem is the songs.
Well, yeah, the songs for sure.
In 2008, you are credited for voice acting in The Quest for Earlog.
Yes, that was another Crystal Shard, I believe, Mags game, which was a parody of Quest for Glory. Mm-hmm. And I believe I play Ilrog, who is the evil wizard guy. I think he just has a few lines at the beginning. I don't remember much about it.
Okay, sounds great.
I had a lot of fun doing voiceover I was always volunteering to do voiceover for AGS games.
Still in 2008, you're credited for scripting in Little Girl in Underland.
Yes, Little Girl in Underland, which was another... It wasn't a Mags game, it was for TIG Source. If you remember TIG Source, that was the indie game source. It was a website where they also had game jams. And they had a demakes. The theme was demakes. Mm-hmm. So the idea was take a popular game and do a demake of it. And so actually the project lead on that was Aaron Robinson, who did Nanobots and later Puzzlebots and later Gravity Ghost. And she had the idea to do a demake of American McGee's Alice, but as like a knockoff Soviet game. So hence Little Girl in Underland. So yeah, she drew all of the characters and did the animations and stuff. And I believe we worked on it again at Mittens in 2008 in France. And there was a lot of really cheap red wine. And there was one night where a bunch of the people there drank a lot of red wine and recorded their lines, which was probably not a great idea. But I played Magic Smiling Cat in addition to doing the scripting for it because I programmed the game.
Wow.
Yeah, I played Magic Smiling Cat. Little girl, you must go and kill things. And I remember being very drunk recording that. And that was an experience. And yeah, that was a fun little project.
Apart from Magic Smiling Cat, the voice for Magic Smiling Cat, you're also credited for sound.
Yeah, because I'm pretty sure that when I programmed it, I added the sound effects. I remember I made a sound effect for when he appears and disappears, which was a sample of the like balalaika sting from Grand Theft Auto 4. So he just kind of goes blah, 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 when he appears and disappears. And yeah, just the various like chopping and weapon sound effects and things like that in the game. It was an AGS game, so it wasn't an actual like third person American McGee's Alice clone. It was just click on things and select weapon, and she just goes whoosh, and kills people, and they go, "Ah!" It was very funny.
And still in 2008, you worked on the 7th Ben Jordan case.
Yes. I released that one in 2008. And then I started working on the last one in 2008, and it didn't come out until 2012 because I got a full-time job and I didn't feel like working on games at the time.
Now, the great thing about the 7th Ben Jordan is that it tries to look even more like Gabriel Knight, Sins of the Fathers.
Does it?
Yep.
I guess. That was a game where I got a tablet. I got a tablet midway through, and I started drawing backgrounds with a tablet instead of the mouse. And I should probably also step back a couple of years and mention that when I did Case 4, which came out in 2005, that was the game where I started using rotoscoping, which is a technique I use to this day. But back then, I had a crappy digital camera that didn't take video, so I had to actually take still photographs of all of the frames of animation. So for walk cycles, I would have to stand there and approximate the different frames of the walk cycles. And then later, when I got a better digital camera that could actually take video, that helped the process quite a bit.
So in 2008, you used the same technique. No, you're talking about Case 4. So in 2005, you used the same technique with still photography and not video files as Jordan Mechner used in Prince of Persia back in 1988 when he took a video of his brother running, and then in order to rotoscope it in the game, he printed out all of the frames and then placed them next to his monitor in order to draw them for the game. So,
yeah, I think by Case 6, which was 2006, I believe.
And 7.
2007. Okay, I stand corrected. By then, I had a camera that could take video. So I think I only did the still thing for Cases 4 and 5, which is still crazy to me to this day, but whatever. We all got to start somewhere.
In 2009, you were credited as a beta tester on Emerald City Confidential.
Sure. I probably beta tested that game. I don't remember anything specific about the process, but yeah.
Okay. So moving on to the Blackwell Convergence, where you're credited as Frank Lyons.
Yes, I remember I specifically asked Dave, could I please play a ghost? And he let me play Frank Lyons, which was a ghost. And again, I recorded it on my microphone from home, and I got sent the lines, and that was about it.
But in the overall experience of the game, do you hear any difference between your recordings and the other recordings in the game?
I don't think so. Okay. I don't know.
Then your crappy mic did the job.
Yeah, no, it definitely did. I mean, it was crappy in that it was just like a little wired plug-in mic, but sound quality-wise, it was pretty decent. So,
still in 2009, you're credited for design on Backdoor Man.
Ah, yes. So Backdoor Man was another TIG source game. So in 2009, at that point, so I'm trying to get my dates in order. Yes. So in 2008, Dave said to me, because he had already started the publishing aspect of Wadjet, he was publishing Puzzle Bots by Aaron Robinson. He told me that he would be happy to publish a game of mine. And I thought, oh, great. That's fantastic. Like, that's my dream. But as I mentioned before, I was still committed to finishing the Ben Jordan games. But at the same time, I was also thinking of ideas for commercial games and what I could do as my commercial game debut. So because I had been working on the Ben Jordan games, I guess I was still in the episodic frame of mind, because I came up with this idea for a triptych of 3 games. And the idea was going to be that the 3 games were going to center around one event, which was the murder of someone. I don't remember. Some famous or wealthy person. I don't know. No one specific, just in the game world. And so the murder was going to be each game was going to star a different character, and it was going to be a different perspective. So it was like Rashomon, right? So everybody, you would see the crime through the 3 different perspectives, and then from playing the 3 games, I guess it would all come together in the end. I don't know. I didn't think that far ahead. But anyway, the unique selling point was that each of the 3 protagonists was going to be from like a career or someone who wasn't typical in adventure games. So the first game was going to be an artist. The second game was going to star a male prostitute, and the third game was going to star a socialite. And so obviously this didn't come to fruition, but I kept the idea of the male prostitute. And this brings us to Backdoor Man, because the theme for that month for TIG Source was adult/edutainment, which meant that you could make a game that was either adult in nature, like Leisure Suit Larry or whatever, or edutainment, or both. So I teamed up with a friend of mine, Edmundo Ruiz, who was also a member of the AGS community and is still around to this day. And we decided to work together to make Backdoor Man, which was the male prostitute game. So it was a game where you play as a male prostitute, and it was set in Miami. And it was him recounting his night to the bartender, and you got to choose which order of, it was 3 stories that each had, there was 3 self-contained stories, very short, but one of them had a lot of solutions. That was the one we designed first, and then we ran out of time and we didn't have as many solutions for the other ones, but there were multiple outcomes for each of the different stories. And then based on what you had done, you got a different ending. And you can play through the game in like 15, 20 minutes. It's not a long game. But so we did that, and we got second place. So that was cool.
Wow.
And also, I guess at that time, not only had I recycled the idea from the previous game idea I had, but I had also already gotten the idea for a Golden Wake, because in one of the endings, you never learn the guy's name. The whole thing, well, you do. The whole thing is that when you meet the clients, they ask you your name, and there's a whole like alphabetical list you can pick from, and then that's the name he gives, and that they call you in each of the things. But then there's one ending where you get arrested, and the police officer comes and calls you by your real name. And I decided that because it was set in Miami, and I already had this idea for a Golden Wake, which was going to be set in Miami, but in the 1920s, I was like, oh, let's make this guy the great grand nephew of the main character in a Golden Wake. So his actual name is Paul Banks. So he's Alfie Banks's great grand nephew.
This was your MCU.
I obviously, kind of, except I was doing it. I wasn't doing it I was doing it pre. So obviously I had the idea for a Golden Wake at the time, because I did start working on it in like pre-production in 2009, but I was still doing Ben Jordan 8, so it was kind of on the back burner. But anyway, that was Backdoor Man. And the reason, let me also point out that the reason it's called Backdoor Man, there's actually 2 stories about this.
You really want to explain this?
A lot of people, I do, because a lot of people think, oh, haha, it's a joke about like Backdoor Man, like, oh, haha, anal, right? But no, that's not what it is. It's Backdoor Man is a reference to someone a man who would, come and have an affair with a woman, and then when the husband got home, he would leave through the back door. So the idea is that, he's a male prostitute. He's probably coming to visit people who are having affairs, and so he most of the time has to run out of the house and escape, which is actually one of the things that happens in one of the situations. So that's where the title comes from. And there is actually a song by The Doors called Backdoor Man. And funnily enough, in a moment of serendipity, I remember that when I uploaded the game, when we finished it, and I uploaded the final version to the forums, I came out of my bedroom and I went into the living room, and my mom had the TV on to one of those stations with music on it to like the classic rock station,
Mm-hmm.
and that song was playing. So I took that as a sign that all was right with the universe.
You should have taken it as a sign
'Cause it
that
just so
you
happened
should
to
have
be-
used the song in your game, to use another
Yeah, and
licensed
then I would
song.
have, and then exactly, yeah, exactly. But no, that's not a problem with that game. So feel free to stream it to your heart's content, anybody, if you can still get it to run.
In 2010, you remastered Ben Jordan Case 2.
I did, yes.
What took you so long?
Well, because I had done Case 1 in 2006, and then I said, I'm not going to do any more remasters. But then the more I thought about it, I was like, Case 2 is probably the weakest one in the series. It already was kind of weak to begin with, but now it's really weak. So I thought, let me go ahead and redo it. So I did. And then it kind of was another reason that Case 8 was delayed for so long. But no, it was fun to do again.
And still in 2010, you're also credited as Victor in Puzzle Bots.
Yes. Another Russian. I guess Erin liked my performance as Magic Smiling Cat so much that she wanted me to do another Russian voice. So I did that.
And what else can you tell us about that role?
Not much. He was one of the other students in the lab in that game, and he was kind of like the villainous one, even though he wasn't really a bad guy. I remember he had to do like an evil laugh, but I just remember he was just one of the human characters, and yeah, I can't really remember much about him.
In 2011, you're credited for voice acting on Gemini Rue and the Blackwell Deception.
Yes. Gemini Rue, I remember Dave reached out to me and said, hey, there's this guy right at the beginning of the game, and for some reason I just imagine him with your voice. Would you play him? And I said, sure, fine. So I'm the guy in the kiosk right at the beginning of Gemini Rue. And again, I just was given the lines and I did them. And who was I in Blackwell Deception? Oh, Durkin, of course. I was Sam Durkin again. And at that time, I believe I had upgraded to a blue snowball. So I had better mic quality.
Wow. You're upping your production values.
Yeah, I always try to.
In 2012, you're credited for Spaceman in Space.
Ah, yes. I am the spaceman.
Which was
that was a lot of fun.
Which was also
that was
created for Mags.
Yes, it was, and I did that with Ben Chandler. We had done. When did Ben Chandler Paranormal Investigator come out?
The same year.
I think it was after that. Oh, same year. Okay, then I guess maybe that was our first collaboration. But he did. I mean, I say collaborate. Well, it was a collaboration, but Spaceman in Space, he did all the art and the programming or whatever. I just did the voice acting and the sound effects. But I was the voice of Spaceman and the Space Witch, and I did all of the sound effects and his little left right when he walks. He goes left right left right left right. But that was very silly. That has a great. That is such a stupid puzzle. That is a great puzzle where you have to melt the Space Witch by making a fake rubber ducky full of pee that she then squeezes and it bursts, and because she's a witch and she gets water, quote unquote, on her, she melts. So stupid.
That sounds along the lines
yes.
of the obtuse puzzles we had in the 90s, so it's perfectly fine.
Yeah, kind of, yeah. But actually, Spaceman in Space came about because Ben and I had started doing the podcast at that time already. And when we started doing our AGS podcast, we had bits that we would do in addition to talking about adventure games and doing reviews and stuff. We would do like little comedy bits. And he had gotten a keyboard that he would just do like weird, moody, like ambient tracks with. And we had a bit called Spaceman in Space, and it was just the guy, it would just be me going, I am the spaceman, I'm in space, and here we see the blah, blah, blah. I'm going to take my space. He would add space in front of everything. So it was like, I'm going to drink my space juice and put on my space pants. And we did a few of those bits. And then we decided to make a game adaptation out of it. So that's where that came from. It wasn't just a random game idea. It was an adaptation of a random podcast idea.
Now, first of all, you guys were podcasting before it was cool. So you were the pioneers of that as well.
I was podcasting way before that too, because I had started doing, it originally started as the AGS audio interview, which was just me interviewing AGS people about their projects and things like that. And then I interviewed one guy, Sam Gray, aka Zudi, and we had such a fun conversation that I asked him, would you like to be my co-host if I made this a podcast? And so we did the AGS PodQuest, and it was the first iteration of the AGS podcast. And we did that for about a year, maybe a little more. And then we kind of just stopped. And then I think towards the end of the run, I had started talking with Ben. And then I said to him, hey, would you like to do the podcast again? Like, because we would talk on Skype all the time. And we would have really stupid conversations. And I was like, maybe we should record these. And so we decided to start doing the podcast. And we did the podcast for 10 years, not consistently. We did 100 and something episodes, but we ended the podcast in 2022. We started it on June 9th, 2012, and we ended it the last episode premiered on June 9th, 2022. So the 10th anniversary of it. But yeah, we had a good run. We had a lot of guests on, including, we didn't focus on guests, but we had a few guests on here and there, including Brian Moriarty, who was very kind enough to come on our podcast.
Wow.
And yeah, they're all available. They're all archived on my website, grundislav.games. So if you want to go listen to them, there's at least 120. I think there's 126 episodes. So it's fun to hear the progression of when we were just young, fresh-faced developers to when we were working on Shardlight together to afterwards to, it's it's quite the journey.
So you stopped podcasting when it became mainstream.
We stopped podcasting when we realized that we didn't really have anything else to talk about, and we figured we'd go out on a high rather than stretch it out. There's only so many topics you can cover.
You ran out of subjects to talk about after 10 years.
Well before that. We ran out of subjects to talk about in about 7 years, and then we would sporadically do an episode here or there when we came up with an idea of something to talk about. But yeah.
Now, the interesting thing about 2013 is the fact that you're credited for the Shiva and Gemini Rue, but these were things you were credited on before, and these are just ports of the Macintosh version
right.
for the kosher edition of the Shiva and the iPhone version for Gemini Rue. And I presume that you're not credited on anything because you were too busy working on A Golden Wake.
Yeah. That was when I went commercial. 2012 was when I pitched A Golden Wake and got the go-ahead that it was going to get published by Wajidai. And I said, all right, I'm going to do it. And then in 2013, I quit my job. I went to Australia. I met up with Ben. We decided we wanted to make... that was... That 2015? No, it would have been 2015 that we had... Okay, no, I'm getting ahead of myself. I went to Australia, and on the way back on the very long flight back, I had a sort of realization, which was every time I go on vacation and I come home, I always think, oh man, I have to go back to work. And I want a job where I can come back from a vacation and think, oh boy, I get to go back to work. And I think that game design is going to be that job. So when I moved to New York later that year, and I decided that I was going to, rather than like do the game design in my spare time and look for a full-time job in the meantime, or not the meantime. Would look for a full-time job to be my full-time job and do the game thing as a side thing. I decided to just take the plunge and live off of my savings for a year and get a Golden Wake done and see where it went. And that's what I did. And the Golden Wake came out in October of 2014. So that'll be 10 years this year. Speaking of time passing.
Do you plan to release an anniversary edition?
I don't think I'll have time to do that between when Rosewater comes out and October. So not right now. Certainly not an anniversary edition anyway.
So what inspired you to create a Golden Wake?
Well, I, as I mentioned, grew up in Miami, and I was always fascinated by the early history of it, especially the Florida land boom, where the real estate people convinced all of these people from up north to come down to a swamp and buy real estate. And then there was a hurricane that destroyed everything, and yet somehow they bounced back. It just seemed like a really interesting story and backdrop for an adventure game, and something that had never been done before. So I ran with it, and I said, okay, I want to tell this story, and I want to, be able to show off this place and this setting in an adventure game. So yeah, that's where that inspiration came from.
Now, you mentioned LA Noir's atmosphere and attention to detail were an inspiration for a Golden Wake.
Yes.
Can you elaborate on how specifically you try to recreate the feeling of immersion?
Yeah, so LA Noir, for all of its flaws as a detective game, I think one of the things it did really well was the depiction of 1947 Los Angeles. I mean, there were plenty of interviews and articles written about how they went through painstaking detail to get aerial photos and map everything as accurately as possible. And in the end, even though the whole driving aspect of that game was kind of pointless, the fact that you could drive around these perfectly recreated blocks of Los Angeles in 1947 was really cool. And obviously I knew I wasn't going to be able to get that level of detail or immersion in a 2D point and click, especially a low resolution one. But I was inspired to recreate the environments as accurately as possible. So I went to the library and I asked to look through pictures in the historical archives, and I scanned as many pictures and found as many pictures online as I could of actual places and things. And luckily there was a lot of pictures taken at that time, because obviously this was this new community that was coming up, and it was well documented. So yeah, I wanted to get the environments as accurately as possible, so that it felt like you playing this game were walking around 1920s Miami. So yeah, that's LA Noire was definitely a big inspiration for that.
And you also simplified the dialogue system from Deus Ex for a Golden Wake. Can you talk about
I tried to.
Well, can you talk about the challenges of taking a complex mechanic like that and adapting it for a different type of game?
Oh, yeah. So I played Deus Ex Human Revolution, and yeah, it has that whole persuasion mechanic where you have to talk to people and persuade them. And when I played it, I thought, well, this is just a fancy dialogue puzzle. So I figured that as a real estate agent, your whole job is to convince people to buy things. So I figured it would be interesting to have that as a game mechanic. So I decided to take the inspiration from Deus Ex and do that in a first-person close-up. But overall, I don't think it really works that great. One, because the characters are still, and really the only indication is that their facial expression changes slightly. So the visual indicator that you're doing well or not is not great for how I did it. And second of all, it's not as well designed as it could be, because you're supposed to pick up clues from what they say, and then when you're given the choices, it's just kind of like, it doesn't really, you kind of have to guess, and it gives you a description of the approach you're going to take, but it's not a one-to-one, okay, I'm going to pick this and I'm going to say this. So I don't think there's too many examples of you pick, or any really. There's no examples where you pick something and it says something completely opposite of what you thought you were going to say, but it's not necessarily clear. So wasn't great. But and also the other thing is that there's kind of a dissonance there because, and I hope this doesn't sound like I'm like beating myself up or dumping on my own game. I'm just recognizing the flaws, because ultimately I do like a Golden Wake. But I feel like the fact is that you're built, like the story says, oh, you're this great real estate agent, but then you're really good at what you do. And then it's completely possible to just fail all the persuasion puzzles and still continue. But so it's like, okay, so you're this great real estate agent and yet you suck at convincing people? What? Huh? So yeah, there's that. But yeah, it was definitely a challenge to adapt it well. I don't think I necessarily succeeded. But it was something to try. I like trying different things when I make games.
Well, it's not like the game wasn't that successful. I mean, it was successful in a way, and people liked it. So why beat yourself up over something that people liked?
Yeah, I mean, people liked it. People didn't love it. Some people loved it, but overall, it was kind of I knew it was going to be a risk. It was going to be a gamble because the subject matter was pretty unorthodox and not exactly something that people would look at and think, oh yeah, I want to be a real estate agent. I kind of hoped that the setting would be the main draw, and I think it was to an extent. But I also think that I think I focused a little too much on the history over the characters, or at least like the interplay of the characters. So it wasn't really necessarily a relatable story. So I think the execution could have used a little bit of work, but it was my first commercial game and I did the best I could at the time. And ultimately, like I say, I'm proud of it. I'm glad I got to make it. And yeah, so it's rough around the edges, but it's like the nice little child that I pat on the head and like, you go ahead, Junior. And I don't know.
Go play with the other kids with the knives over there.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. I think one of the best negative reviews I got for A Golden Wake was, it's like watching a bunch of elementary school children try and put on a play of Scarface and failing miserably or something like that.
Well, at least they compared it to Scarface. Always look on the bright side.
I guess. That's true.
In 2016, you got special thanks for Kathy Rain. Why?
And I don't know why. I don't know. I guess I must have done something that they liked. I don't know. I spoke with... I guess I must have spoken with the developer because we talk every now and then. I don't recall making any significant contributions to the game. Maybe I gave them some advice. Maybe I played a demo. I don't know. I mean, I appreciate being thanked, but I couldn't tell you specifically why I was.
Okay. Have you played the game?
I have not. I'm going to tell you right now that I don't really play many adventure games anymore. So, yeah.
Well, at least you played adventure games back when you were a kid. So that's something.
Yeah, I did. Because I mean, I make adventure games all day. The last thing I want to do is play an adventure game unless it's really something that I'm interested in or stands out in some way.
Wait, did you play Return to Monkey Island?
I did, yes.
Okay. Still in 2016, you're credited for Shardlight.
Yes, Shardlight. That was my second project. And my collaboration with Ben Chandler. So Shardlight came about because I wanted to make another historical game after A Golden Wake. But I wanted, excuse me, I wanted it to be set during the Black Plague. And I wanted there to be a character that was the personification of death that visually looked like a raven. Those were the two ideas I had. And then I started talking with Ben about it because I was like, man, you make a lot of games. I've made a lot of games. Maybe we should make a game together. And so we decided to take that idea that I had and repurpose it. And so it changed from being a medieval setting to a post-apocalyptic future. And we kept the idea of the character that was a raven, which ended up being the Reaper. And then, of course, instead of the Black Plague, we made up a disease, which was green lung. And then I also wanted to have the villains be the aristocracy and look like French Revolution era fops, but with creepy porcelain masks. Because why not? And I knew Ben's art style, and I knew Ben could do it. And so we had the idea to do this game. I think we had the idea I think we must have come up with it at some point between 2013 and 2014, because I went back to Australia in 2015. And I remember during that trip, we did a lot of planning and design and artwork and stuff. Wait, no, I'm getting my stuff mixed up again, because in 2013 was when we went to Walpole, which was a place where we stayed at a hotel. Actually, it was Albany, Western Australia. We stayed at a hotel, and there was a garden across from the hotel downstairs that had like a courtyard that was an inspiration for one of the scenes in Shardlight. So we had already come up with the idea for Shardlight in 2013, while I was still working on a Golden Wake. It's hard to keep track of these things sometimes. I apologize. I can only imagine the people you talk to who haven't thought about these games in like 30
this
years.
This was 8 years ago.
I know. I'm having trouble remembering the order of things 8 years ago. Jesus. So I'd had the idea for Shardlight since then. So we decided that would be the next project. But then it was an interesting situation because we had agreed to do this. Yes, of course, because now I remember. Yes, at GDC 2013, I told Dave about Shardlight. So it was an interesting situation because I had just released a Golden Wake, and a Golden Wake did okay, but it didn't do great. If I would not have been able to continue doing game development full time with the income that a Golden Wake was bringing in. So Ben had been hired to be the full-time artist at Wadjet at that point in late 2014 after a Golden Wake came out. So we had already pitched the idea of Shardlight, and Dave had agreed that he was going to publish Shardlight. But the question was then, okay, Ben's getting paid a salary as my full-time artist. But usually the way that it works with publishing is the developer doesn't get any money while the game is being developed. You have to wait until it comes out, and then you get royalties for it. Mm-hmm. So how is that going to work? Because Ben's getting paid, and it's half his game. So how is that situation going to work? So anyway, long story short, Dave decided to hire me on as a full-time salaried designer. So I would get paid a salary while developing the game. In exchange for when the game came out, I wouldn't get royalties. So that's how I was able to continue being a game developer, because I got paid while making that game. So that was the end of 2014. Developed Shardlight. That came out in March of 2016. And yeah, we developed that game. It was a very quick development cycle. I think that's the game the commercial game at least, that has taken the least amount of time, because we got it done in like 15 months or something like that. So yeah, I mean, it helped that, Ben was doing the art and stuff. I only had to worry about programming and writing. And
yeah,
not that those are insignificant things. Yeah, not that those are insignificant things, but it's half the work, right? So, it's to be able to have somebody else taking care of the art and animation and stuff was great. And then, of course, we had Nathaniel Chambers doing the music. So yeah, that was a project. That was a fun project, except I very much learned that in a team working situation, I was the weakest link because I didn't have any experience really working on teams. So I had to learn to let go of absolute control and learn to collaborate. So that was a good learning experience in that regard. But it definitely had its moments of stress. But it turned out all right in the end, I think.
And when was the last time you played Shardlight?
Last time I played it was probably before it came out to test it. I've watched people play it, not the whole thing, but as far as playing it from start to finish, yeah, probably not since 2016.
The first time I played it was during the pandemic, and it was a very interesting experience to play.
I can only imagine.
Yeah.
See, what's funny is that obviously I wrote that game before there was a pandemic.
Mm-hmm.
So now that we've all been through this experience, it's funny to see certain things like, the fact that Amy wears a mask everywhere except when she's around other people. She takes her mask off to talk to everybody. But to be fair, the idea was that green lung, you could get it from being out in the exposed lands. So she was wearing the mask in the lands to like when she's out in the wilderness to avoid getting it. And then when she's around other people, but anyway, that's just one of those weird little details.
Hollywood did the same thing, because in TV shows and movies that actually address the pandemic, whenever two people would talk, they would remove the masks because usually the actors want their faces to be seen. So
exactly. Yeah. The only person in Shardlight who never takes the mask off is Tiberius.
So again, you pioneered that as well. Removing the mask while you're in crowded places.
Oh no! I don't want to be credited for that.
Next up, denying that the Earth is round.
Great.
In 2017,
I've been to Australia twice. I can't deny that the Earth is round.
Okay, but maybe it's in the end of the flat circle. I don't know. I don't listen to these people.
Yeah. No. Nor should you, everybody.
In 2017, you were credited as the race commentator on Dumbass Drivers.
Oh my God. Yeah. That was another AGS person who was like, "Hey, I'm making this game. Can you be can you do a voice for me?" And I did. And I don't know if that game ever came out, but I certainly never saw it. I know I just had to record a bunch of barks like, "Hey, dumbass." It was like a very stupid redneck voice.
Hey, it did come out.
Okay. Well, I never saw it.
I mean, games that you released before you went commercial, I understand you were young and you needed the money. But what's your excuse for Dumbass Drivers?
The guy making it was a longtime friend, and he asked me to do it as a favor, and I did. And I didn't get paid for it. That was not one of the two roles that I've been paid for.
So you were just young.
We haven't.
You didn't need the money.
Yeah, exactly.
On Paradigm, same year, you're credited for Paradigm Superfan Ending.
Yeah. That was funny. Yeah, Paradigm's great. Jacob, I had met Jacob in person when I went to Australia in 2015, and I knew he was working on Paradigm, and he said, "Oh, I have all these endings I'm going to do as a parody. Would you do a voice?" And I said, "Sure." So I got to play the super fan, and I got to be like, and he's a real nice guy, honest, and like, "Oh, I love you." So it's the fanfic ending where like the slash fic where Paradigm falls in love with the bad guy, and it's very stupid. But I had fun doing that too. I'm going to start a counter for every time I say, "Oh, I had fun doing that."
Well, it's great that you had fun.
But it's true. It's true. I cannot complain or bemoan the fact that I had fun doing things. So,
in 2018, you're credited on Lamplight City.
Yes.
for removing the inventory.
Yep, I sure did.
Why?
I sure did. Because I didn't feel like an inventory combination puzzles had any place in a serious detective game. And I drew inspiration from Blade Runner, Westwood's Blade Runner, which also did not have inventory. And I figured you can do a game where you don't have inventory combination puzzles. You just get rid of the inventory, and any items you pick up just get stored, and then you get a dialogue option to use them. Because my main focus with Lamplight City was I wanted to make a detective game where you could get things wrong, and it would be okay. Because I thought about how many cases in real life go unsolved, and again, LA Noire was an inspiration because it was interesting to me that their whole thing was, okay, you have these interrogations and you have to read people's faces and determine when they're lying or whatever, and you can get them wrong. So I did a playthrough where I got everything wrong on purpose to see how it would change the gameplay, and it didn't. It just, whatever information you were supposed to successfully coax out of them by reading their facial expressions, you would get that information some other way. Like some guy would just be like, oh, I found this coin on him or whatever. So that whole thing was kind of pointless. And then it was interesting too, because there was the contrast of you would have sequences where you would have to follow somebody either on foot or by car or whatever. And if they escaped, you would get a game over and you would have to start the sequence again. So I thought, okay, well, what if you had a detective game where getting the questions and the interrogations wrong actually did make a difference, and it did deny you a certain piece of evidence. And if you didn't find that piece of evidence, then you wouldn't have what you needed to successfully follow this particular line of investigation. Or if the person got away and you didn't track them, how would that affect the gameplay? So that's what I set out to do gameplay wise with Lamplight City. And then again, I thought about it and I was like, okay, well, most adventure games have inventory, and yet the most common inventory puzzles are ones where you have to build these ridiculous tools out of completely unrelated items. And that seems to be what people associate with inventory puzzles. So I don't want to have that. I mean, there's plenty of other realistic inventory puzzles where it's like, you find a flashlight and it doesn't have batteries, and then you find some batteries, and then you use batteries on flashlight, and okay, now the flashlight works. All right, great. But that's just clicking something on something else. But so yeah, I was like, I don't want to make a game where you have to build a fishing rod out of stupid things. So I just decided to get rid of the inventory and focus on the investigations and the interrogations. And I wanted to make a game that was set in like the classic 19th century London type thing, but wasn't actually in the real world, because I was kind of still going off of A Golden Wake and being burned by sticking too closely to history. So I thought, well, I'll make my own history. And so I created the alternate history world of Vespuccia. And so I didn't have to be bound to specific historical facts and anachronisms or worry about anachronisms. And because it's steampunk-ish, there's also like the ethericity, and so that can kind of, if it's like, well, they didn't have this technology in 1844, well, not in the real world, but in this world where there's this advances in steam technology, yes, they do. So yeah, it gave me more room to play with that. But yes, Lamplight City was also very much inspired by Gabriel Knight. I ripped off the aesthetic shamelessly for it with the close-up interrogation portraits and the whole general sort of mood. And the city of New Britannia is very influenced by New Orleans. But I had that bugbear with me for a long time, and I feel like I've finally gotten rid of it. Like, I have really no more interest in ever doing anything Gabriel Knight related ever again. So Lamplight City was sort of the cathartic, get that out of my system. So yeah. I will say one thing though, if I may. I got an email a few years ago from Emily Morganti, coming full circle again.
Mm-hmm.
She's the PR person. And she said, Jane Jensen would like a Steam key for Lamplight City. And I was like, and I gave her a Steam key, and I never heard anything again. So I'm going to take no news as good news. I'm going to assume that she played it and she liked it, but I have no idea if she ever played it. I have no idea if she liked it, if she hated it, if she thought it was just some asshole ripping, or sorry, I don't know if I can swear. She thought it was just some jerk, okay. She thought it was just some jerk ripping off Gabriel Knight. I don't know. But the fact that she was interested enough to ask for a Steam key was enough for me to be like, oh my God, Senpai noticed me. So, yeah.
Wait, can you tell if she redeemed it? Was it redeemed?
I have no way of knowing if she redeemed it. No.
If you still have that Steam key, go to your Steam account, activate the product.
Yes.
And if it works, then you'll know that she never redeemed it.
Then I'll know that she never did. Yeah. Well, I'm too scared to do that, because if she didn't, then I'll just be like, oh no. So I'll just live in my own fantasy world.
And then you'll redeem the key, and then the day after, it will be the day she actually tries to redeem it herself.
Right. Exactly.
Now, you joined in on a live stream in which Paul and I played Lamplight City.
I did, and thank you very much for playing that.
How was that experience for you?
Oh, man, it's always terrifying when I watch people play my games on stream, because I guess, I don't know, I'm kind of in my own head about these things, but I figure if someone is taking the time to play the game on stream, it must be because they're interested in it. But my greatest fear is that someone will say, oh yeah, I'm going to play this game. And then me as the developer shows up, and then they think that they have to be nice because the developer is in chat. And then like, if they don't like the game, they feel like they can't criticize it or say anything bad about it because the developer is in chat. Or worse, they do think that they do say horrible things about it, and then I have to run away crying or something. I had that experience actually kind of with a Golden Wake, where someone was streaming it, and I came in for the beginning, and then I left, and then I watched back later, the VOD later, and they got to a point in the game where they were like, oh no, and they were complaining about a plot point. And I thought, ugh. So yeah, I'm always terrified that people are going to play the game, and then on stream they're going to say, actually, this game sucks, and then they're going to stop playing it and, I don't know, throw it into the fire or something. So thank you for not doing that on stream.
Well, it's not because we're nice. The good thing, or actually the bad thing about me, is the fact that I'm brutally honest, because when we played King's Quest 1 fan remake on stream, that was my first time playing King's Quest 1, because the only King's Quest I played and actually loved was King's Quest 7, and I played King's Quest 6 somewhere in the 90s, and other than that, I ignored the rest of the entries. And so it was my first time playing King's Quest 1, the fan remake. And so the entire live stream, I trashed the game. I talked about every puzzle and everything I hated about the game. And then Ken Williams showed up in the chat.
Oh no.
But I didn't stop talking smack about the game. I just toned it down a little bit. So if Lamplight City would have given us a bad experience, you can be certain that I would have said something.
Okay.
Take that as a compliment.
Okay, I will. Thank you.
Now, I know that Lamplight City was supposed to be published through Vegetai Games, and eventually wasn't, because Dave Gilbert wanted a few changes.
Partly.
How drastic were the changes Dave wanted to implement in the game before you parted ways?
Well, I put it this way. Before I came up with the title for Lamplight City, the code name for the project was Poe Dickens, because it was heavily inspired by Edgar Allan Poe and Charles Dickens. Mm-hmm. And I think Dave wanted Doyle Verne. He wanted more like a Sherlock Holmes, more steampunk. He wanted more steampunk. That was his main thing. And based on, I don't remember specifically what the changes were, but I know that it got to the point where it was like, well, the game that you want is not the game I want to make. So I don't, and he even said, like, it's not fair for you to make these changes just for the sake of, publishing it. So it's like, yeah, let's just agree to disagree and part ways. Cause yeah, I had actually been laid off, shortly before Shardlight came out, because for various reasons that I'm not going to get into because it's not my information to give. But I knew that, like, going in, that my job was kind of the most precarious because, Ben is the artist, and without Ben, Dave can't make games with art. So, like, I was the most expendable because I basically, could do the writing and the story and everything. So there was no need to keep me on as a full-time employee. So I got laid off with just like, oh, well, but I'll still publish Lamplight City. And I was like, okay, great. But yeah, then once we realized that the visions weren't really aligning, then yeah, which sucked at the time. Being perfectly honest, it was not great because I freaked out a little bit because I was like, well, what am I going to do now? Because I can't think of any other publishers out there that focus exclusively on adventure games. So it's going to be real hard to find somebody interested in publishing. But at the same time, I'm happy that it happened because, one, it made me do the work. It made me pay my dues, right? Because I was very lucky in that I knew somebody. Like, the whole reason I was published by Wadget Eye in the first place was because I knew Dave. Like, I didn't really have to do anything except come up with a game. I didn't have to shop it around. It was kind of like carte blanche. Like, I'll publish something. You just have to come up with something good, which, is great. So I had the actual experience of having to cold email publishers and present a vertical slice and talk about budget and things like that, and actually do the legwork of every other indie developer. So that was a character building experience, I think, and just an experience building experience. And, I had a lot of false starts. I emailed a bunch of publishers. Some never got back to me. Some did. There was one publisher that we were like this close to signing, and then they decided to go with another game. And then I found Application Systems Heidelberg, actually through Emily Morganti, who also did PR for them. And she said, oh, they're publishing some games. Like, they published Nelly Coodalot, which was Alistair Beckett King's game. So would you like to talk to them? And I did. And thankfully they were interested, and they published Lamplight City, and now they're still my publisher for Rosewater, and it's been great working with them. And no disrespect to Dave, because I'm very grateful is the word. I'm very grateful to him and allowing me to get my foot in the door. And I'll always appreciate that and be grateful for it. But at the same time, I also feel like I have now had the opportunity to kind of step out and make my own path, because it's yeah, I mean, step out and make my own path. Basically, that's where the period in that sentence goes. Because Wadget Eye is a very recognizable brand in the indie adventure game scene, but I feel like a lot of the times the brand overshadows the developers. And I'm not saying that like, oh, I want to be famous, I want people to know my name. Like, that's not why I do this. But at the same time, it's like, I would like to maybe carve my own niche in the genre and not just be necessarily associated with one publisher or another or whatever. So yeah, but I've gotten a lot of great opportunities with Application Systems Heidelberg, and I think that, they're great too. And yeah, so.
Awesome.
It's funny because when that happened, Rock Paper Shotgun wrote about it, which I thought was really bizarre. It's like, do people care about this? Like, I think a lot of people wanted there to be more drama or something. Like, oh my God, they parted ways. Oh, there's some sort of drama. No, there was no drama. It was just creative differences, as they say. But there was
this your first time on the internet?
No, but I guess it's the first time that I realized that the internet could care about me in some way.
The internet cares about clickbaity titles, and that was one.
I guess that's true. I guess. I don't know.
On March 12th, 2019, at 6:42 p.m., you tweeted, "New game alert. My next project is a Western drama adventure set in the world of Lamplight City. It's called Rosewater. Here's a couple of work-in-progress screenshots and a teaser image." Now, we're about to celebrate the 5-year anniversary of that tweet.
We sure are. We sure are. We sure are. Lamplight City came out on September 13th, 2018. I had been working on it for 2.5 years. My intent was to have the game out earlier in 2018. But I had the brilliant idea to lip sync all of the character portraits. Mm-hmm. And at the time, I was using a program called Pamela, which I had also used to lip sync all of the character portraits in the Ben Jordan games that I had done that had speech, except for the second one, because at that point I realized that it was a waste of, not a waste of, but it was very time consuming. And so I didn't realize exactly how time consuming it was going to be, because to give you a very brief explanation, the way Pamela works is you load every individual speech file. You type in the text of the speech file. It creates the phonemes in addition to it showing the waveform, and you have to then drag the phonemes along the waveform and position them and then preview it so that the little mouth moves so you can see that it moves accurately. Mm-hmm. And the reason I did this was because I tried using Rhubarb, which was the program that was used for Thimbleweed Park for the lip sync, and actually the program that I'm using now with Rosewater. And it was good because it was automated, but it wasn't perfect. There were still little idiosyncrasies in the lips. And because it was the character portraits and the whole focus was the face and the mouth movements, I wanted them to be as accurate as possible. So that's why I used Pamela. Now, bear in mind that there was about 4,000 lines of dialogue to synchronize. And I was averaging about 20 lines an hour. So it took me about 3 months to get the whole game lip synced, working like 12 to 14 hour days. So it was, when Lamplight City came out, I was very burned out. And it took a toll on my mental and my physical health. And I said, okay, I'm going to wait until I start doing, I'm going to take some time off before I start even thinking about doing anything else. And so I did, but that lasted about 2 months. So I had already come up with the idea for Rosewater while making Lamplight City, so I already knew what I was doing next. And I already had the basic outline written for it. So it came out in September, and in about late November, early December, I decided that I wanted Rosewater to be higher resolution than Lamplight City. So I started doing some character tests to see how I could get sprites working and animated at 720p, and if the workflow would be any more or less time than Lamplight City. So I did a few character tests. I came up with the companion characters. I did some walk cycles and stuff like that. And then I was like, okay, all right, this is good. So I started actual nose to the grindstone, full steam ahead production of Rosewater in January of 2019. I gave myself the rest of the year off, basically. And then, by the time March rolled around, I had a few backgrounds done and I had a few characters done. And I thought, well, Lamplight City took me 2.5 years. This game will probably be about the same size. So I'll probably get it done by 2021. Why not? And so I tweeted about it, and I figured it's never too early to start the hype train rolling. And then I made the mistake of saying, oh yeah, it's coming in 2021. not realizing that a game twice the resolution of Lamplight City with probably more than twice the content would take me just as long or less. No, in fact, it's taken me twice as long. So, yeah.
So is Rosewater your Curse of Monkey Island in terms of being a game with a higher resolution and you figuring out along the way that higher resolution usually means that it takes more time to produce the animations, the walk cycles and everything else?
No, not really, because in the end, the animation doesn't actually take longer. It takes about the same amount of time. It doesn't matter that it's higher resolution because it's still pixel art. So it's just slightly bigger. But actually, to get technical, the character sprites in Lamplight City for each area of color, so like say the pants, the shirt, or whatever, I was using 4 color ramps. So like there was a darkest dark, there was a highlight, and then in between the two there was like 2 middle tones. So for every thing and every frame of animation, I would have to draw, outline in the dark, fill in with the middle, put the second mill, and then put the highlight, which is very time consuming. But with the higher resolution, I actually studied Full Throttle and that sort of like middle period LucasArts sprite style, which I guess it's kind of Sam & Max Hit the Road kind of has it, but I think it only has 2 colors per area in a character. But Full Throttle has 3. It has a dark, a middle, and a highlight. Indiana Jones and the Iron Phoenix would have had the same thing. So I studied those, and I realized that I could get away with having bigger characters and use that sprite technique, or not technique, but use those color ramps to make the sprites not as complicated color-wise, but still bigger and still look good. And also, since the sprites were bigger and more expressive, and you could actually see details in their faces, I also wanted to push myself by having facial expressions and body language. So also I realized, well, I don't need to have character portraits because you can see the characters' faces. So that also made me realize I could use rhubarb for lip sync eventually. And so, yeah, that's it wasn't my Curse of Monkey Island in the realization, but it is my Curse of Monkey Island in that it is high resolution, even though it's not 640 by 400. It's 1280 by 720. But I do actually have, let me count. 1, 2, is it only 2? I think it's only 2. I have 2 voice actors from The Curse of Monkey Island in Rosewater.
Wow.
Maybe more, but I don't. 2 that come to mind right now. So yeah.
Does Guybrush make an appearance in the 3rd act?
He does not. I did not get Dominic Armato. You're thinking of Lucy Dreaming.
No. I'm asking because you haven't settled on the number of actors from Curse of Monkey Island, so I wondered if we're in for a surprise.
No. All the actors are in. It's just a matter of me remembering who is in. Oh, wait, no, I'm wrong. There's 3 actors from Curse of Monkey Island in Rosewater.
Soon to be 4 with Guybrush in the 3rd act.
Yeah. If you've played the build I sent you, you have heard all 3 of them, actually. So, yes.
And given your history with using licensed IPs, I presume you have no problem adding Guybrush to the 3rd act without asking for permission. So.
No, I definitely do have a problem with that. I do want to point out that I have never used any licensed anything in any of my commercial games. So
I know.
Well, you do, but maybe the people out there don't. So I want to clarify.
Now, I've been playing earlier this week the latest playable demo. Actually, it's not the playable demo. I think it's one of the...
No.
your version. It's the alpha version.
It is an exclusive preview build of the first act, yes.
Now, what I liked about it, and the thing that's giving me the Dig vibes, is first of all, the way that the music is very minimal and serves the ambiance very well. I mean, at some point, while working on the questions for this conversation, I had the game running in the background, and I noticed that I've been sitting for 3 hours with just the ambient sounds of Rosewater, and sometimes there are flies flying around and the wind. So it was pretty nice as background music. So well done on that, because I usually use the Dig soundtrack to write questions for my interviews.
Nice. Yeah. Yeah, that was a very conscious decision for this project, because usually with adventure games, you have the music always on. Again, to bring up your interview with Michael Land, he talked about how in Monkey Island 2 they wanted to have wall-to-wall music, and that's usually what most adventure games do. They always have wall-to-wall music. There's always a track playing. It always loops. That was certainly the case with Lamplight City. Every location had music. There was never any periods of silence. But with this project, I actually took more inspiration from Red Dead Redemption, because Red Dead Redemption had that had the ambient music thing, where depending on where you were location wise on the map, you'd have different tracks play, but they would play every so often, so it wasn't like constant music. So I definitely wanted to have that for the majority of the game. So like in Rosewater, or when you're out in the outskirts or other places, there's what I call jukebox tracks, because it's basically a randomized jukebox that plays through the number of tracks in random order, so you never get the same ones in the same order again. So they're just like 15 to 30 second tracks that play every 30 or 40 seconds or whatever. The interval between them is also randomized. But I did that because I also felt like it fit the setting, because, Western setting, it's very much about the ambience and the noise, or the dust and the wind and the flies and all that stuff, or the birds and the dawn and the forest and all that. So I wanted the ambience to really carry the sound design, and also have the music there as support, but not have the music be front and center necessarily all the time. I mean, obviously there's scenes where something is happening. Excuse me. There's scenes where something is happening that have a dedicated piece of music for them, but the other stuff in between, I felt it was important to not have that.
And what about having a sing-along song in the intro, like in Freddy Farkas?
No, but I did for a very long time want to have an interactive campfire song, very much like the Curse of Monkey Island pirate song.
That was meant to be, yeah.
Yes, because you don't really get a sense of it just yet in the first part. It's more in the second part. But the whole thing with Rosewater is the dynamic and the relationships between your companions, and like certain dialogue choices will make certain companions like you and some won't, and stuff you do and stuff like that affects your relationships. So I wanted to have, the main thing I wanted Rosewater to feel like is like you're going on a road trip with your friends. So the relationship with the companions was really important. So I had an idea for doing there's 3 campfire scenes, and I wanted to have one where they're all sitting around the campfire, and one of them who has a guitar, one of the companions who has a guitar, is playing, and there would be a song where he would like sing about the companions, and then you could pick the choices of like whether you would say something nice about them, or whether you would just say something kind of middle of the road or insult them. So it would be like, so and so is great, and he goes on the thing and blah 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 blah, and then it would like be on a timer, so then you could be like, but one, it was very complicated and I couldn't figure out how to make it work in a way that was seamless. It would have required way too much coordination. And 2, I realized that the one character who actually gets the guitar in the game, he is New Spanish, which is the stand-in for Mexico in this world. And he's a refugee from New Spain, so he wouldn't know any traditional Vespuccian or American campfire songs. So story-wise, it wouldn't make sense for him all of a sudden to be able to lead a sing-along, and none of the other characters really play the guitar or anything. So there's that. So in the end, I dropped it, but I did for a very long time want to have an interactive campfire song, but that sadly did not make it into the final game. I actually went as far as coding a mock-up using the pirate song from Curse of Monkey Island. There is a debug in there somewhere where you have like a timed dialogue thing where you can choose the dialogue and it plays a pirate I was meant to be in the correct order. So it technically
in the version you sent me,
I don't remember it's in there, it's coded in there, because actually technically you have the full game, but debug mode is not on, and that's not something that you can turn on. That's something that has to be turned on when you compile the game. So you can't actually access it, but I think it's in there somewhere.
So you have licensed material in this demo?
Probably, but I'm pretty sure I deleted it so that it wouldn't be in the full game.
Now, one of the main problems is that in adventure games, there are awesome elements that no one comments on. And so the game developer believes he or she spent time for nothing on that part of the game. Now, referencing my conversation with Michael Land, nobody commented or wrote anything in the reviews about iMuse. And so they thought that they just wasted their time with the creation of this elaborate sequencing system. So I took it upon myself to let him know that iMuse is something that they should have worked on and that was significant to many people. And so I took it upon myself to let you know that the dust particles in the air when the characters walk is something that I truly appreciated. And I don't know how much time you spent on that one, but I really like that part.
Well, the dust particles are not triggered by the characters walking. The dust particles are just randomly placed in the scene and happen every now and then. But thank you. I'm glad you noticed that. Actually, that was another thing that I was inspired by Red Dead 1, because I first drew up the backgrounds for the town, and I spent some time walking around the town and thinking about how to make it more immersive. And so I loaded up Red Dead 1 on PS3, and I went to the very first town you get to, Armadillo, and I kind of just stood there and watched and saw what was happening. And there were like little dust particles and flies, and like the trees wiggled and stuff like that. And I was like, okay, surely I can find a way to recreate these PlayStation 3 particle effects in a 2D adventure game. Especially, I knew I could because I've used external particle effects programs in all my previous games. So I spent a long time figuring out what to do. And I put in the dust and the flies, which are also all random, and just anything to make the environment feel more immersive. So I'm glad that you noticed and appreciated that, because I definitely put a lot of thought into that. And the pedestrians too. I like doing pedestrians because there's nothing that annoys me more than adventure games that supposedly take place in like places where there should be a lot of people and the streets or whatever are just completely empty. That always kind of breaks the immersion for me.
Yeah, but given that you have so many pedestrians, that means that you have to spend more time on creating their sprites and walk cycles.
It's true. But it gets to the point where it's like you do one walk cycle, and once you get your flow, it's like, it's just another walk cycle. Whatever. I can knock out a walk cycle in like 2 hours. It's fine. And it especially helps if it's only one direction. So, you can mirror the pedestrians. If they're just walking left and right, you'll really only have to do one walk cycle. It's not like you have to do a full 8-frame walk cycle for them. So that's no problem.
Now, during your development process for Rosewater, you started live streaming your development sessions.
Yes.
Now, my question about this is whether or not you feel that sharing too much of the game might ruin some of the surprises, or, in your opinion, the game benefits from this type of oversharing of the creation process?
I think more the latter. I actually started live streaming when I was doing Lamplight City. But I made it a more consistent thing with Rosewater, with Wild West Wednesday every week. I'm always very mindful about what I actually share on stream. I try to avoid sharing anything that could be a spoiler. So yeah, I don't think I've ever streamed anything that's really a spoiler. And anyway, even if it's just like I'm doing a character, you don't really know the context of how the character appears in the game, so it's pretty hard to spoil anything. And like sometimes, I think the closest I've ever come is sometimes when I've done voiceover editing streams. Sometimes there are some lines that are spoilery, but I usually have the script open I always have the script open to see what the next line is. And if it's something really spoilery, I'll say, "Oh, this is a spoiler," and I'll mute temporarily while I do that. But no, I think that streaming the development process is something people really like, because people really like seeing the behind the scenes stuff. Adventure Game Geek actually came to my stream for the first time yesterday, and later on tweeted about how fascinating it is, and like how he got an appreciation for realizing how much work actually goes into the games. So that was nice. So yeah, I definitely, and I think also, the people who come regularly, it's a nice little community building thing, and I think people genuinely like to feel like they're a part of the development process. So yeah, I think live streaming is definitely a nice way to access developers and the development of games. And of course, if people are worried about spoilers, they don't have to watch the live streams. So it's a win-win situation.
Now, fast forward to today, you tweeted 9 hours ago. I'm very pleased to announce that I'll be working as the casting and voice director on an upcoming adventure game. Extra pleased to announce that we will not be using AI voices.
Yeah, I was trying to capture the current discourse, even though yeah.
Wait, so when will you reveal which game you were talking about?
Well, I will not be the one revealing it. The developers of that game will be revealing it. I don't know when. I assume probably by the time this interview goes up, it'll probably be revealed. However, I am technically under NDA, so I can't say publicly until it's been revealed. So I don't want to say it just in case it's not out by the time, or it's not public information by the time this interview goes up. But I will say that it is an adventure game that has been announced, and it is definitely one that you've heard of. So,
okay,
I'm very excited to work with on this project, because it'll be my first. I've been wanting to branch out into voice directing on other projects, and this will be the first opportunity to do so, and hopefully it won't be the last. So.
Now, still in the Twitter sphere, it seems that the people from Colossal Cave knew that we were talking today, because they tweeted the question, which classic NES game do you still play? And they posted a screenshot, or they posted a photo of King's Quest V, the NES version.
Ah, yes. Yes.
Which is your favorite King's Quest V version.
Yeah, because it doesn't have any voice acting. Oh, that's mean. I'm sorry. I'm sorry to Josh Mandel and Richard Aronson and everyone else in that game. But
no, we all agree that the voice acting sucked in King's Quest V. Don't worry.
Yeah. Actually, if I can backpedal a little bit and gush a little bit about the voice acting in Rosewater, because that's something else that I want to talk about, and I think is important to talk about now, especially with all of this stuff now about AI and SAG-AFTRA and whatnot. But I mentioned that with every game I like to, well, I don't know if I mentioned it, but with every game I like to level up in some way, whether that be, if I do the art, or if I try some new art style, or if I up the resolution, or, and with this game I wanted to up the audio quality, which both the sound design and the music and the voices. And so I investigated, and thankfully was able to make it happen to make this game a union project, which basically meant that I got to cast actors who are in SAG-AFTRA, which is the actors union here in the US.
Mm-hmm.
And that means it means that there was some paperwork, but it also meant that I got to work with people who had done voices in games and TV shows and projects that I had been a fan of as a child and later. I got to work with lots of people who had done voices in lots of classic adventure games that I grew up playing, including, like I mentioned, The Curse of Monkey Island. And it was a great experience, and I loved it, and I think the game sounds great, and I'm really proud of the cast that we managed to get for it. And I think that that's going to be one of, I hope at least, that will be one of the unique draws to the game. Because as far as I'm aware, actually, no, that's not true. I'm not the first indie adventure game to use union actors, because Voodoo Detective did it, and Lucid Dreaming also did it.
Mm-hmm.
But as far as I'm aware, I am the first indie adventure game to use union actors who have been in classic adventure games. Many of them have been in classic adventure games, at least. So yeah, but yeah, the whole AI thing, I'm not going to get on a soapbox about that, but yeah, I think I wouldn't use AI for voices when you have such wonderful talent available. And I've been trying to lead a crusade to let other developers know that it is within your reach to get people like this. So, I've very much been advocating for it, but yeah, so you played the build. Did you recognize any of the people in it?
I didn't recognize any of the people, but I will say that the voice acting was immaculate in that build. So,
well, thank you.
Well done on that.
Well, thank you. Well, did you speak with the doctor?
I have.
The town doctor. Okay. Well, the town doctor is played by Neil Ross, who it was in Curse of Monkey Island as Wally. Mm-hmm. He's also been in several Sierra games. He was the narrator in the Leisure Suit Larry games, and he was the narrator in Freddy Farkas, and he was in G.I. Joe back in the day. So yeah, he's one of those.
I know Neil Ross. He's on my bucket list for 2024. Oh,
really? Yep. Okay, cool. Well, yeah, he's a cool guy. He's a lot of fun to talk to. Everybody was really fun to work with. Dave Fennoy is in there. Dave Fennoy played King Andre in Curse, and obviously he was in The Walking Dead. He was the lead in Walking Dead. He plays the clerk in the offices of the Rosewater Post. Leilani Jones Wilmore, who played the Voodoo Lady and Carla the Swordmaster she played the Voodoo Lady in Curse. She was Carla in Return and Secret. Mm-hmm. She was also in The Dig. She was Cora Miles in The Dig. She is Lola Johnson, who you probably met if you got to the end of the build or somewhere in the middle of the build. And was that 3? That was 3. Those are the 3. From Curse, anyway. But the sheriff was the sheriff of the town is Cam Clark, who played he's been in 400 and something things, so too many to mention. But he's Liquid Snake. He was Leonardo in Ninja Turtles. He was Freddy Farkas. He's been in lots of stuff.
And there's your Freddy Farkas connection.
Yep, I have both Neil Ross and Freddy Farkas, and they share a scene together in the beginning. And it's funny because
You should have gotten Danny
I know
Delk.
people say it. Yeah, maybe next time. Maybe next game. I definitely already have a list of people I want for my next game. Yeah, I could get Denny Delk maybe if I wanted to. But it's always funny to me, like, you know, people, when I was announcing the cast and pointing out the stuff and mentioning that, like, Neil Ross and Cam Clark were both in it. They're like, oh, you should have had them record like an Easter egg line where they make reference. I'm like, you think these people remember those? That was like 30 years ago. Like, I actually told Cam Clark, I was like, oh yeah, you did a game called Freddy Farkas. He was like, oh yeah, was that popular? I'm like, yeah, kind of. I mean, people who know 90s adventure games know it. And he was like, oh, great. But yeah.
It's just like they ask Robert Patrick to record an Easter egg in which he says it's the T-1000 model in the dig.
Right. But at least that was at least only like 3 years after he played that role, not
True.
30. But I actually also name dropped when we were recording with Neil Ross. I was like, you know, I'm going to do a little name dropping. You worked with a guy named Al Lowe. And he's like, oh, yeah. I'm like, yeah, he calls you One Take Neil. And I can see why. And he's like, oh, thank you. So he did all of his lines in one take. He's very good.
On your website, you have an FAQ section in which one of the questions is, what software do you use to make your games? And of course, you mention Adventure Game Studio. But you also mention Adobe Photoshop CS2. Are you still using a Photoshop version from 2005, or did you just forget to update your website?
I am still using a Photoshop version from 2005, yes.
Really? Does it still work on Windows 11?
It still well, I have Windows 10, but it still works on Windows 10. And it does everything I need to do, so I see no reason to change.
I mean, I get the hate for Creative Cloud, but how about CS3, CS4?
Honestly, there isn't really any feature that I am aware of in any later versions that I think, oh yeah, that would help my workflow. So as long as it's got an animation reel and a pencil tool and a brush, then that's fine by me. So yeah.
Okay, that's interesting. I was expecting an entirely different answer.
Really? What were you expecting?
I forgot. I've been using the same blurb from 2005 on my website. And so this is what remained from back then.
Yeah, no. I haven't had a website since 2005, I don't think. I only just recently redesigned my website.
Well, what are your thoughts on achievements in adventure games?
I like them, but I also feel like achievements in adventure games should be for things that you go out of your way to do, like some sort of obscure interaction or some sort of skill-based thing. I don't like it when it's an achievement just like, oh, you finished chapter 1, because I didn't do anything. I just played the game. I like achievements where it's like, oh, you showed every single character the soggy tissue, right? Stuff like that. So yeah, I like them. I'm a self-professed achievement whore. I definitely try and platinum as many games as possible on PlayStation.
Well, first of all, nowadays completing a chapter is an achievement, given everyone's short attention span.
I suppose that's true.
Actually finishing it. And when you look in the Steam analytics of a game, you usually see that, completed chapter 1, 50%, completed chapter 2, 30%. And it's not even long games. I'm talking about shorter games. They just...
Actually, I will say that now that you mentioned that, as a developer, it's also functional to have achievements, because if you do have achievements, like say you finished the game, you can see what percentage of your players actually have finished your game.
Mm-hmm. Exactly.
So, yeah.
So if you said that you try to complete all of the achievements on the games that you actually play, in the remastered version of Grim Fandango, there's an achievement that Team asked for specifically, which is the achievement of playing the game entirely using the tank controls. Do you have that achievement?
Let me check, because I'm pretty sure I do. So now that I've checked, I can tell you that I have, in fact, 100%ed achievement-wise. I've 100%ed Day of the Tentacle and Full Throttle Remastered. But I have only 96% achieved Grim Fandango. I am missing 2, and the 2 that I am missing are hidden.
The tank controls.
They're hidden. Let's see if global achievements tells me what they are. No. No. Try to beat Domino in a fair fight. I don't know what that involves. And try to guess Domino's password a few times. So I do actually have the tank controls one. What's it called?
Wow.
What's it called? Here we go. Play the whole game with tank controls. Tim demanded this achievement. 3.6% players have this achievement. Well, I'm one of them. I unlocked it on February 1st, 2015 at 1:55 a.m.
Wow. Well played.
Thanks. Literally.
Yeah.
I'm pretty sure I played it with tank controls when I played it, because I that's how I played it originally, so I was used to playing it that way. I don't think I was particularly enamored with the point and click.
I wonder how strict that achievement is. I mean, if you click the mouse once, then you're no longer entitled to get it. I don't know.
I have no idea.
Now, you used to mention Gabriel Knight Sins of the Fathers as one of your favorite games, but you recently stopped doing that, saying that it didn't age that well. What didn't age well, in your opinion?
What? When did I say that?
It was during an interview in which you were asked what were your favorite adventure games, and you talked about Gabriel Knight Sins of the Fathers, but then you changed your mind because you said it didn't age that well, and you changed it to Day of the Tentacle.
I don't remember that specific comment, but I guess it's really the only sort of objectionable thing I can think of in Gabriel Knight is the fact that like all the bad guys are people of color. But aside from that, I mean, and you know, Gabriel's sort of sexist attitude. But I mean, Gabriel Knight 1 is still one of my favorites. It's not like I say, "Oh, I hate that game. It sucks." So yeah, I don't recall specifically that answer. But if I did give that answer, that's probably why.
Okay. Can you give some specific examples of puzzles you've designed that you're particularly proud of?
No. Because I don't know. I've never really... I mean, I design puzzles for my games, but I've never... Actually, no, you know what? There is a puzzle in Rosewater that I am proud of. But to tell you too many details would be a spoiler. I will say that it's a deduction puzzle, and it's completely skippable if you want to just brute force your way past it. But I feel like the elements of the deduction that you have to do are designed in such a way that it is satisfying to solve the puzzle. So I'm proud of that.
Okay. And how do you handle player feedback when you're developing an adventure game?
Very badly. I scream and thrash and say, "No, you're wrong." And then I come back and I say, "Oh yeah, actually you had a point." No, I usually I ask for player feedback pretty often. In the development stage, if there's a particular sequence or something that I'm not entirely sure about, I'll send builds to people, other designers, or just people that I know have played my games, and I'll have them test it out to see what they think about it, and make the necessary adjustments based on that. But aside from that, I do alpha and beta testing, and I just get feedback, and I listen to most of it, and I implement as much as I can. But sometimes sometimes some people go a little overboard, but I do what I can.
And how do you handle the vast amounts of feedback that you get? I mean, it's not like you're sending it to one or two people. You're sending it, especially the alphas or maybe the betas and the demos. There are hundreds of people who are playing it, and probably you get tens of emails with feedback.
No, it's not hundreds of people who play it. It's like tens of people who play it. And the tens of people that I recruit sometimes I'll put out an open call and say, hey, if you're interested in beta testing, join my Discord or whatever. And I'll get 10 people who say they're interested. And of those 10 people, I'll have maybe 3 who give any sort of feedback. The rest just don't play it or forget or whatever. And to be fair, it's asking a lot. And I unfortunately am not in a position where I can pay for beta testing. So it's completely on a volunteer basis. So I tend to do a lot of internal testing. Like I'll play the game myself. I'll get someone else, my partner will play it and make notes and stuff. So obviously, what I rely on beta testers the most for is to find game-breaking bugs, because obviously I don't want to release the game. And then it always happens, even though I don't want it. But you don't want to release the game and then find that, oh no, the game doesn't load up, or the game crashes at load, or there's a game-breaking bug that doesn't let me finish the game. So I try and prevent that as much as possible. But yeah, no, I've never had a situation where it's been hundreds and hundreds of people or feedback. I think the most number of playtesters I've ever had at any given time has been maybe 20, and I don't think they've been consistently giving information, or giving feedback, rather.
Now, why is Curse your favorite?
Why is Curse
What's
my favorite?
What's wrong with Monkey Island 2?
The puzzles suck. Monkey Island 2. Okay, I'll tell you the 2 biggest pet peeves I have with Monkey Island 2, puzzle-wise. There's one puzzle in particular that's just pointless backtracking, which is the getting the map from Rapscallion. Because it's like, you go through the effort of doing the ash to life. Okay, you get the crypt key, fine, great. You take the ashes to the voodoo lady, you get the ash to life, you go to the cemetery. Well, actually, no. You go to the voodoo lady, you pick up the ash to life. She tells you that she needs ashes. You go to the graveyard, you open the crypt, you get the ashes, you go back to the voodoo lady, she gives you the ash to life. You go back to the graveyard, you resurrect Rapscallion. He says, could you check the gas for me? Okay. So you go to the kitchen, you use the key that he gives you, you turn off the gas, and you go back to the graveyard, and then he says, okay, great, and he gives you the map. That's not a puzzle, that's just busy work. That's just going back and forth. There's no challenge there.
That's deliberate. Ron Gilbert wanted every puzzle to have you walk around the 3 islands.
And yeah, you do at first, but once it gets to the point, like that added extra step of him giving you the key and going to the weenie hut that's on the exact same island, that's just filler. There's no need for that extra step. They could have cut that out and it would have been fine. You already went through the trouble of resurrecting him and all that, so whatever. Anyway, there's certain puzzles. There's a few more that I can't think of off the top of my head, but the puzzles in Monkey Island 2, there's some real stinkers. Oh, of course, there's the infamous monkey wrench puzzle, which we won't get into, but there's that. But Curse of Monkey Island, I just love it because I think the production values are great. I love the look of it. I think it's beautiful. I like the voices. I like the music. I love the fact that you're hearing the Monkey Island theme played on live instruments for the first time. That was great when that first happened. And just overall, like, the story is not anything to write home about, but really none of the stories in Monkey Island are. I will say that the one thing I like more about Monkey Island 2 that over Curse is that I like the darkness of the story of Monkey Island 2. And I love the whole sequence at the end with the voodoo doll and LeChuck and everything. I do think that Curse of Monkey Island makes LeChuck into like a cartoon bozo villain, but I'll take that trade-off with the fact that it's Earl Bowen voicing it, and he does a great job of it. But yeah, overall, I think as a sum of all of its parts, I think Curse of Monkey Island is the better game. And I actually, to name drop again, one time at GDC at the Adventure Party, I actually said this to Jonathan Ackley, and Ron Gilbert was like 4 feet away from us, and I was like, "Don't tell Ron," but and he was like, "Oh, thank you." So,
I mean, you had Ron Gilbert and Jonathan Ackley, and you chose to go to Jonathan Ackley and tell him how much you like Curse instead of going to Ron and telling him how much you like Monkey Island, for example.
So that's the thing. I know you've interviewed Ron Gilbert, and he's a very jovial guy. He's not the grumpy gamer that everybody makes him out to be. But I personally, I've met him at least 3 or 4 times, and every single one of those times, I'm just like, "Oh, hi," and I have nothing else to say. I can't think of anything to say to him. Like, I'm pretty sure he's heard, "Oh, thank you for Monkey Island," like 1,000 bajillion times. So it's not like I'm pretty sure I told him like, "Oh yeah, I love Monkey Island," like the first time I ever met him. But it's just one of those things where I've never been able to carry on a conversation with him. And not because he's unfriendly, but just because I've never been able to really think of what else to talk to him about. Like Dave Grossman, super easy to talk to him. Jonathan Ackley, also super easy to talk to him. Bill Tiller, super easy to talk to him too. But for whatever reason, I just can't break that conversational ice barrier with Ron Gilbert. So
well, you should approach him and let him know, I didn't like the fact that they changed personality traits of Guybrush in Curse of Monkey Island. That's it.
Okay.
That's your icebreaker right there.
Okay. But I didn't mind that, so that would be a lie.
And besides, look at you. You're holding a 3-hour conversation with me. So how hard can it be to hold a 5-minute conversation with Ron Gilbert?
Yeah, but you're easy to talk to as well. So I don't know. I just can't. It's just beyond saying, "Oh yeah, Monkey Island." I can't think of it. And I'm sure I could talk to him about design, and I'm sure I could talk to him about puzzles, and I'm sure I could talk to him about many other things. But it just doesn't happen. I don't know. Maybe I just haven't found myself in the right situation yet. Who knows? Maybe.
Talk to him about the grog puzzle in Monkey Island 1, where you have to switch cups.
I love that puzzle. I think that's one of the best puzzles in Monkey Island 1.
Okay, so Ron Gilbert also likes that puzzle the most in Monkey Island 1. So talk about that.
Okay. Well, all right then.
How do you balance the need for linearity with a desire to give players the illusion of choice?
The need for linearity.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I mean, the way that I've tried to do it with Rosewater, because there is a lot of alternate content for what you do, especially in Act 2. There's entire scenes that you will see one version of versus another one based on your companion relationships. But I feel like, I'm not saying I've cracked the code, but I feel like what works for me, the best way to give the player the illusion of choice is to focus on reactivity. And what I mean by that is to have the game actively respond to your actions. So if you told a character something in Act 1, have a payoff where they reference it in Act 3 or Act 2 or whatever, so that you as the player think, "Oh yeah, look at that. Something I did made a difference. I wonder what would have happened if I hadn't done that, or if I had something else." Because, as you said, many people have very short attention spans these days. So the number of people who will actually finish your game once is low enough. So there's not very many people who will replay your game. So there's very few people who will replay your game. I'm not saying give a complete illusion of choice. I do think that having choices that matter and having significant consequences is important. But I also feel like at least making the player feel like something they did made a difference or gave them an alternate outcome will at least make them think, "Oh, well, yeah, if I had done something different, maybe I would have seen something else." So that if they never replay the game, they'll think, "Oh, that's cool. I would have had a choice." And if they do replay the game and then they do something different, then they will have to have a separate payoff, because otherwise they'll say, "Oh, well, then my choices didn't really matter." But yeah, I think what it boils down to is just reactivity, and a healthy amount of reactivity.
So what you're saying is that in Rosewater, you have a feature that Telltale used to promise so much, but never actually implemented it in their games. Because every time you do something in one of their later games, for example, like Batman, you talk to someone, you talk to Harvey Dent, and you choose a dialogue option, and it would let you know Harvey will remember that.
I always hated that.
And then you keep on playing the game, and Harvey doesn't mention it. So
yeah, I always I only ever of all of those games I only ever played, and of those games I mean like the choice based interactive cinema games of later Telltale. I only played The Walking Dead season 1, season 2, and The Wolf Among Us. And in The Walking Dead season 1, you had the option to turn off those notifications, and I did because they annoyed the hell out of me because they were really. First of all, they were immersion breaking. And second, like you said, they didn't always pay off. So it was like, why are you doing that? You're just doing that to say, oh, look, we did this thing. So yeah. But no, I mean, I'm not trying to be that ambitious. Obviously, I'm a solo developer. I can only do so much. Like if these AAA or II or whatever indie bigger studios can't do it effectively, what chance do I have? So I'm just trying to do as best as I can and have you feel like you're doing something. That being said, I've also been working on this game for 5 years for a reason, because there is a lot of content in it. So, yeah.
And as someone who works mainly on point-and-click adventure games, what aspects of this genre do you find the most challenging, and what aspects do you find enjoyable?
Okay. Well, the aspect I find most challenging is puzzles, and specifically integrating puzzles into the narrative in a satisfying enough way, because I am well aware that people who come in to play adventure games have certain expectations of what adventure game puzzles should be. I don't necessarily agree with that a lot of the time. So I tend to design puzzles that are what the hardcore adventure game fans would consider easy, but I consider them logical because, they're easy because you're thinking in a logical way. Because if you pick up a crowbar, you're going to use it to pry something open, or you're going to use it to smash something. You're not going to use it, as I mentioned earlier, to construct a ridiculous tool by combining it with twine and a fedora or something to make like a puppet with a hat or something. So just the fact that you don't have to be like, well, how the hell was I supposed to figure that out? A lot of people think that that's what adventure games should be. I don't think that's what they should be. I think they should just be stories that you play, and there are obstacles that come up, but those obstacles should be in service to the story or the characters, or help you understand the world or something better. So specifically with puzzles, the integration and having them make sense. I often, when I design a puzzle, I think, is that too adventure gamey? That's kind of my barometer of how best to figure out if a puzzle works or not. Like I have my design notebook here for my notepad for Rosewater, and there's one puzzle in it that was actually I don't know how far in the build you got, but it's in like the latter half of the build. There was a puzzle that involved finding like a statue, like a one of those like art model mannequins, and you were going to have to like position it in the right way there was a clue about like poses, and you were going to have to like position it the right way to open up a little drawer to find like a clue. And okay, yeah, that's very adventure gamey. But then I'm like, okay, this is a game that's grounded in reality. The person that this trinket belongs to, why would they go out of their way to hide their secrets in this weird combination thing that nobody else would like? There's no way anyone else could figure this out, which I guess, okay, yeah, that's the point of a safe, right? But like, no, you wouldn't commission this special little lock. Like, no, people don't lock their doors with elaborate mechanisms that require stupid codes. They use either a padlock or a combination lock, or real world things that can be bypassed by either smashing them or picking them or doing some way of guessing the combination or something like that. And yeah, okay, those are valid puzzles, but then people are like, oh, those are too easy because I didn't have to do this whole elaborate thing. So yeah, that's why puzzle design is challenging. Enjoyable things is creating the worlds and creating the stories and creating the characters and just creating everything. And one of the moments that I love the most is after I've had an idea for a game and I've written out the outline and everything, and I start getting the preliminary stuff together. The thing that I always focus on is getting the main character sprite done, not like the walk cycles, but at least the views, so that I can import it into AGS and have a character that will stand there and can turn around. They might slide when they walk, but at least they turn around. And having the first background done. And that moment where I can load up the game and I have the background and I have my character and I can move my character around in the background. For every game I've ever done, that moment of, okay, yes, this is what I envisioned. This is what it's going to look like. That's like the moment for me where I'm like, okay, yes, this is going to be my next game. And that's what I find the most enjoyable. Everything after that is all downhill. No, I'm kidding. It's not really. But that's like that's the peak that I always like to start a project on.
And can you share any insights regarding your approach to pixel art, both in terms of aesthetics and the technical aspects of creating visually appealing games?
Yeah, I mean, I kind of already talked about the rotoscoping and for Rosewater, like the color palettes as far as like using a dark, a middle, and a highlight for the character sprites. Yeah,
but what about the backgrounds?
Well, yeah. So the backgrounds is a little different because strictly speaking, it's not pixel art. It's painterly, I guess we're going to call it that. I mean, when I think pixel art for backgrounds, I think of the backgrounds that were done, for example, Monkey Island 1 and Loom and stuff that were done in deluxe paint where it was like pixel by pixel by pixel. Whereas I paint my backgrounds with brushes. I used to resize my backgrounds to make them more pixelated. I used to paint them at higher resolution and then scale them down. But for Rosewater, one of the challenges was I'm painting them at the actual game resolution, which took a little while to get used to, but I think is the better for it because you don't really lose any detail. But yeah, insights into how I do it. I mean, usually what I do is I'll make a really rough sketch first in just black and white, just kind of figuring out the layout of the room. And then if there are any particular important things like the exits or objects or hotspots, I'll like paint them red so they stand out. And I'll use that as my placeholder image for a long time until I actually paint the background. And then when I paint the background, I just kind of, I don't know, I paint it and I think about what'll make it look nice and where the lighting is coming from. That's kind of how I approach it. I lay out the colors first. I lay out the flat colors first. And then I figure out where the light sources are. So if it's like an interior, I'll figure out if it's like, excuse me. If it's an interior, I'll figure out if it's light coming through the window or if there's a lamp or some other artificial light source. And if that's where it's coming from, then I'll think, okay, well, I'll base the shading on that. And usually I'll build the room. I kind of think of it as like The Sims, like constructing something in The Sims. I usually build the room first as far as like the walls and the floor and the ceiling, and I'll do all of that first. And then I start putting objects and furniture in it. Once I've established what the light source is, because once I know where the light source is, then I know how I can shade the different things and what the shadows they'll be casting are. And then after that, like once it's all drawn in, then I'll what's the word I'm looking for? I'll spruce it up a bit by using like overlay layers and things to emphasize the light. So if it's just like I'll if I want most of the room to be in shadow and then the one light source to be the prominent thing, I'll do like an overlay layer with like a dark blue and then adjust the transparency so that it's more shadowed, and then like put another overlay layer with on the light source and things like that. So that's kind of how I mostly approach most of my backgrounds.
And what are some of your biggest mistakes that you've made as an adventure game developer?
Oof, do you have another 3 hours? Or 4 at this point? Gosh, I've made lots of mistakes. Definitely made a lot of questionable puzzle design decisions in like the early Ben Jordan games, because in the early Ben Jordan games, my puzzle design philosophy was, well, I grew up playing adventure games and these are the kind of puzzles they had, so I guess I'll just make up whatever and people will like that. So there's some really dumb puzzles in the earlier Ben Jordan games. There's one puzzle in the original version of Case 2 where there's a guy who has a map that you need. So in order to get the map, you have to shake a flower that he's allergic to at him, so he sneezes and the map falls on the floor. But then when you pick the map up, he insists that you maintain eye contact with him, so you can't do like a switcheroo of the map. So you then have to like get a pen from somewhere else and a piece of paper and draw your own map. So then somehow that means that if you have that in your inventory, you give him the fake map instead of the actual map. I don't know. That's a bad puzzle. So yeah, I've definitely made that mistake. I guess I know I said I wasn't going to dump on a Golden Wake, but I guess I kind of made a mistake of making my first commercial game be something very niche. Maybe I should have started out with something a little bit more commercially viable, but I think all things considered, it was fine.
Point-and-click adventure games are niche. So.
Yeah, I know, but when you make a point-and-click adventure game that's about a subject that's even more niche, that's already two things that are working against you. So if I had started off with a post-apocalyptic story instead of the real estate story, maybe things would have gone differently, but I don't know. What else? I made the mistake of using too much licensed music in my early games.
And licensed IPs as well.
Licensed IPs, yeah. What else? I made the mistake of releasing some games that I probably shouldn't have, which we didn't talk about, and we won't. But that's more for embarrassing personal reasons than anything else. But I think that's pretty much it. I don't really have too many regrets. All things considered, I'm very happy with how my career trajectory has gone.
Well, that's awesome.
Yeah, I think so.
That's what I wanted you to realize, that you have no regrets and that your career path is pretty great. Yeah,
no, definitely. I mean, at the end of the day, I'm doing what I love as a career, and it's great. And there's always the self-doubt. There's always the worry that the game will come out and no one will play it or no one will like it. And, I'll have to basically stop doing this. That's the main fear. I mean, I've used this analogy, which doesn't quite, I feel like I haven't quite formulated it yet, but it's about 90% of the way there. So my ultimate goal is to cross a river. And in order to cross the river, I have to put down stones to make a bridge to get across. That's very adventure gamey, right? And each one of those stones is a game, right? So like a Golden Wake is the first stone. Shardlight doesn't count because I don't get any money from Shardlight. So Lamplight City is the second stone. And Rosewater is going to be the third stone. And the idea is that each of the, as I keep putting down those stones and building my catalog, more people will hopefully become aware of my work. And with each new game, it'll hopefully bring in more people who will then discover the previous games that they maybe didn't know about. And that'll keep me going and, as a sustainable venture, because as much as I love doing this, obviously it also needs to pay the bills. So I obviously have to make some money off of it. And I've been very lucky so far in that regard, in that every game has done better than the last. And I'm hoping that that continues with Rosewater. So the point is, I want to keep putting down these stones to be able to put more stones to then cross that river. And I guess the metaphor fails here, because what is the river? What's on the other side of the river? Death, I guess. So.
And on that note.
Or let's just say retirement. How about that? Retirement.
Okay. Now, do you see yourself using anything other than Adventure Game Studio in the foreseeable future?
No. I thought about switching over to PowerQuest, but with the whole Unity debacle, I realized that probably didn't want to do that. And honestly, I have yet to design anything outside of the scope of what AGS can do. So for now, I don't see any reason to change. And I don't think that's going to happen with my next game. And I really don't think it'll happen with the game I'm going to do after that. So for now.
That's why I warned you about Rosewater being like Curse, because after Curse, if you remember, LucasArts moved on to Grim Fandango.
Right. I'm not doing 3D.
Let this be the only resolution switch for the foreseeable future, because the next resolution switch will be to 3D.
Well, no, I mean, technically I could go from 720 to 1080p, but honestly, the difference between those two resolutions is so minimal that I don't particularly feel the need to do that. So yeah, I'm sticking to the current resolution. I mean, if I was going to do maybe like line art or something, maybe, but I'm sticking to pixel art, so I don't see any reason to go any higher.
Now, what in your opinion is the optimal number of locations and optimal number of characters for an adventure game that's released nowadays?
You're asking the wrong person, because I have way too many characters in my adventure games. Lamplight City had 70 speaking roles. Rosewater
That's why I asked in your opinion. Doesn't have to be the correct answer.
Okay. Lamplight City had 70 speaking roles. Rosewater has about 72 speaking roles. It depends. Because if it's a linear game where you're only going to meet so many characters, then a small amount of characters is fine. If it's a larger game where you have a lot of locations, I mean, as a player, I'll answer this question as both a player and as a developer. As a player, I enjoy games that have not an extreme amount of locations, but enough locations that I feel like I'm actually exploring an environment. So I would say, 60 to 80 screens, maybe. That's a pretty good number. As a designer, and as far as characters, like maybe 20 to 30 characters. But as a designer, I want to say a lot fewer, because it's a lot less work, but I tend to go with like 120 rooms and like 70 characters. That seems to be my MO recently. So I don't know that that's the correct number. And I don't know that that's even what I recommend. And in my opinion, that's right. But that seems to be where I'm at. That being said, however, I did mention that I have 2 other projects lined up. My next project is going to be very linear and a lot smaller, because the project after that is not going to be that. And I don't want to tackle another giant multi-year dev cycle again.
So Rosewater 2 and Rosewater 3.
Sure.
Now, what do you think about the current trend of having the narrative as the core gameplay mechanic?
I mean, I feel like, that's a perfectly valid gameplay mechanic. I don't think... I feel like this goes back into the question of like, the age-old question of what makes an adventure game. And the whole distinction of labels, if it's like adventure versus narrative or what have you. I think that having a narrative game where the gameplay mechanic is the story, and you just have to make decisions and things like that. And there's no real walking around or picking things up or anything like that. I mean, that's perfectly valid. I wouldn't necessarily want to play that all the time, but I do feel like there's plenty of games that have come out that fit that description that are perfectly fine. I mean, I loved Firewatch, and that's what they call a walking simulator. The narrative was the core focus of that game. Mm-hmm. But I also, as a adventure game lover, player, I like adventure games with puzzles, but I also don't think that the puzzle design of the 90s is something that should still be a thing, because we have the internet and we have YouTube videos and we have very little patience and short attention spans. So that doesn't really fly anymore. So for developers who think that they need to do that, I don't think it's a net positive. And I know that there's lots of people who are afraid that by removing puzzles, you're dumbing down the adventure genre. But I think that the adventure genre has a lot of space for lots of different types of games. So I don't think it's a bad thing, as a short answer.
Okay. Now, before we conclude our conversation, I have a few questions from our viewers.
Oh.
Ramon Wilhelm asks, what was your favorite voice acting role in a game?
That I did?
Yup.
Ooh. That's a good question.
The hospital guard.
I liked Dr. Morales in Resonance, because he dies right away, and because I got to do my Mexican soap opera voice for him.
Maria.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I like Dr. Morales. That was a fun role.
Anna from the Classic Gamers Guild podcast asks, how do you strike a balance between providing a bit of challenge and ensuring the players don't become frustrated?
I don't know if I succeed at this, but I feel like the main thing that prevents players from becoming frustrated while still having a challenge is proper communication from the game. So as long as the game gives you a clear indication of what you're supposed to be doing, then I think there's a far lesser chance of the player becoming frustrated because they have an idea of what they're supposed to do, but the challenge then lies in figuring out how to do it. Now, this is important for the player to do testing and get differing opinions, because if the challenge is open that door as a very basic thing, the frustration lies in, how was I supposed to know that I needed to open the door? So as long as the game communicates to you, okay, you're supposed to open the door, then all right, fine. Now my focus is the challenge of opening the door. But if there is a perfectly valid solution for opening the door that maybe the designer didn't think of, that then the player thinks of, and then that doesn't work, that's where the frustration lies. Because it's like, well, I had this key. Why didn't this key open the door? Okay, well, it's because the key is broken or the key is not the right size. As long as the game communicates that, okay, that's important. Or, I mean, ideally, you could have more than one solution. But yeah, the challenge is fine, again, as long as you as the player have a clear idea of what the challenge is, and as long as obviously there's the correct solution, but if there's a valid solution that the designer, for whatever reason, doesn't want you to be able to do, provide a valid reason why not just a generic, I can't use that here. Because it's like, well, why can't I cut the rope with the scissors, but I can with the serrated knife? Because the designer didn't think of that, or because the scissors are too dull, or something like that.
Cosmic Void asks, will you continue to make games 2-3 decades into the future?
I hope so. Although I've often wondered, am I going to be a 50-year-old man sitting in his basement making adventure games? Am I going to be a 60-year-old man sitting in
Yelling
his basement?
at the clouds.
Yeah, exactly. So that goes back to my putting stones in the river metaphor. I want to try and make and put as many stones and as big stones in the river as possible, so that when I get to be 55 or 60 or whatever retirement age is, I can say, oh yeah, those games I made me enough money to be able to retire. And not, oh, I guess I gotta make another game now. I'll make a game about finding my dentures. Sorry to everybody out there with dentures. That was rude.
Yep. Actually, it's going to be come to think of it, I'm not sure if there is a geriatric point-and-click adventure game.
Didn't there is one called Grandma Badass that came out recently. I don't know how much of a point and click it is, but I'm pretty sure I've seen it in adventure game discussion forums and stuff. So,
I mean, nowadays you have weird games like Goat Simulator and whatever simulator. So a geriatric point-and-click adventure game seems right up everyone's alley.
I feel like that's your tagline, right? You have the title, Blah Blah Quest, a geriatric point-and-click adventure game.
And all of the puzzles have to deal with bureaucracy.
Oh my God.
You have to take this paper and mail it to someone or sign something. Or
actually, going back to what we were talking about inventory, I was thinking about this. One of the things that kind of frustrates me as an adventure developer is how I just feel like adventure games as a medium to tell a serious story are not necessarily taken so seriously, at least like pure traditional adventure games versus what we were talking about before, like the Telltale style or walking simulators or what people call narrative games. Excuse me. Because you have games like Dear Esther and the Vanishing of Ethan Carter and things like that, and Firewatch, where it's like, oh, it's a serious, mature story and these things. But when people think of traditional adventure games where there is inventory and there's stuff like that, usually they default to, oh, it's got ridiculous puzzles, because basically if you grew up playing like LucasArts games, with the exception of The Dig, all of them were comedies and all of them had crazy inventory puzzles. Like, what made me think about this was the dentures and like Day of the Tentacle with like the chattering teeth and George Washington and all that, right? So, but then also the bureaucracy when you switch over to Sierra, like Space Quest had wacky puzzles, yeah, okay. King's Quest didn't have so many wacky puzzles because it was more fantasy, so it was whatever. But then you have Police Quest and all of the inventory. Like, I can't think of any other. Well, no, that's not true. But Police Quest, most of the inventory item puzzles are like, use gun cleaner on gun or fill out form or whatever.
Or
and it's
walk
like,
around car.
Or walk around car, exactly. It's only in Police Quest 4 when you get to the end of the game when it goes completely off the rails, where you have like, use glue to stick rear view mirror onto drumstick to make periscope to look around the serial killer's door to make sure his dog doesn't attack you. But that's a special case because that game at the end gets ridiculous. But yeah, like, just one to your point about bureaucracy, yeah, the Police Quest games are the most bureaucratic and the most like use the inventory combination puzzles to be about just like, write something in. But then also I think that's what the problem is. It's like there is that assumption that all adventure games must have ridiculous puzzles because all adventure games, like the Venn diagram is basically all adventure games have ridiculous puzzles because they are adventure games. But no, most people think adventure games have ridiculous puzzles because most of the adventure games that people remember are the comedies, which, yeah, they had ridiculous puzzles because they worked in the context of the game. But I don't think that there are enough, or at least people don't remember enough adventure games that lean more towards the serious or the mature that
people remember the turtle puzzle from the dig.
Right. Exactly. Which I will say that one gets a bad rap because there is a fossil hotspot that is a guy.
That's what I keep saying.
But nobody sees it. And that's the problem. Nobody finds it. And because nobody finds it, they think it's completely unfair. And
exactly.
I get that. That could have been communicated better, but it's there. They didn't just throw everybody under the bus. But the adventure game, I think, that comes closest to the classic adventure game, I think, that comes closest to having like the best, most mature, most dramatic, interesting story is Grim Fandango. And yet, Grim Fandango has some pretty bad puzzles in it, some pretty out there puzzles. So, yeah, there wasn't quite a balance there. But that's the thing. I would love to see more adventure games that tell more serious stories and are appreciated as more like. I would like to see people who are not necessarily familiar with the genre be less dismissive of the genre because they think that adventure games by default will include ridiculous, nonsensical, illogical puzzles. And I'm going to step off my soapbox now.
Now, one last question from me. What are your plans for 2024 and how can people stay in touch with you and your work?
Well, my plans for 2024 are to continue working on and hopefully sooner rather than later release Rosewater. Once that's done, I would love for Rosewater to do well enough that I can take 2 months off and just not do any development whatsoever or worry about adventure game development or anything. At first I said 6 months, but then I realized that I don't think I can sit still without working for 6 months. That's just not how I roll. So 2 months is what I'm shooting for. If I release Rosewater earlier in the year, where 2 months is not like going into 2025, then I'll probably start working on my next game. So that's pretty much my plans. I would love to do some traveling if I can. And yeah, those are my plans. As far as how people can keep in touch and communicate with me, there are various ways to do that. I'm on pretty much every social media platform as Grundislav in some way, shape, or form. That's Grundislav. You can find me on Twitter. I'm at Grundislav Games. I am at Grundislav Games on... It's either Grundislav or Grundislav Games on Twitter, on Mastodon, on Blue Sky, on Instagram. I have my website, which is grundislav.games, where you can go and sign up for my newsletter, which I send out every now and then.
What about your TikTok account?
I do have a TikTok account, but I haven't posted on it very much. It's also Grundislav.
Do you do some Rosewater dances?
You thought I was going to say I didn't have a TikTok account, I bet, but I do. No, I didn't do Rosewater dances, but I did post my rotoscoping behind the scenes video and another video about the voice actors and another video about the trailer, and I didn't get very much engagement. So maybe I should start dancing.
These are the things that truly appeal to Gen Z.
Apparently. But anyway, so there's that. I have a YouTube channel, which is also Grundislav Games, where I post all sorts of behind the scenes and the VODs of my live streams. I have my live streams on twitch.tv/Grundislav. I stream every Wednesday at 1 p.m. Eastern for Wild West Wednesday. Sometimes I'll do an additional stream during the week, like Frontier Friday or Throwdown Thursday or whatever, but I generally stick to Wild West Wednesday. What else? My games are on Steam and GOG.com. You can wishlist them or buy them. And I think that's it. It's more than enough, but that's about it.
Wow. It's a good thing your company's name is Grundislav Games, because then it probably wasn't that difficult to get that username across all
No.
of these social networks.
Thankfully, it was not. No. And if you go to my website and you go to the frequently asked questions, you can learn what Grundastav means if you don't already know. Because
because people keep asking you that question,
that's the whole reason. That's the whole reason I made a frequently asked questions section of my website, because of that one question. And then I had to think of other questions that I knew people asked me a lot. So that's why it's the first one on there.
Well, Francisco, it's been great chatting with you today about the bright future of point-and-click adventure games.
Oh.
And I truly hope that 2024 will be the year of Rosewater.
I hope so too. Thank you very much, Daniel. It's been a pleasure. Thank you again for having me on. I always appreciate content. Well, I don't know if content creators is the right term anymore, but I always appreciate people like you and others, who are still interested in the adventure game genre enough to not just, obviously the interviews you do with all of the people from the old days are great, but I love, that there's still an interest in the current scene and in the future of it too. So I very much appreciate that. And thank you for giving me this platform to ramble on.
My pleasure.